Hello friends. Did you know nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy these stories, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps. Thank you for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. The snow came down in sheets across my windshield. Each flake caught in the headlight beams like a tiny meteor before disappearing into the black. I'd been driving Interstate 80 for 17 years, knew every truck stop and way station between Cheyenne and Omaha, but tonight the road felt different. Wrong somehow. The kind of wrong that settles in your gut and stays there, cold and heavy like a stone. My name is Cal Reddington, and I haul freight for a living. Been doing it since I was 23, back when my knees didn't ache and I could drive 16 hours without feeling it in my spine. Now, I'm 40, divorced, and the only thing waiting for me at home is a one-bedroom apartment and a cat that barely tolerates my presence. So when Maeve Hollister from Dispatch called that morning, asking if I wanted to take a load through Wyoming in January, I said yes. The mortgage doesn't pay itself, and winter months are always slow. "Weather's going to turn nasty," Maeve had said, her voice crackling through my phone speaker. "Nobody else wants to touch it, Cal. But if you're willing, the run is yours. Double rate for hazard pay." I'd taken it without thinking twice. Double rate meant I could actually put something in savings for once. Maybe fix the transmission in my personal truck that had been slipping for 3 months now. Besides, I'd driven through worse. Or so I thought. The storm hit around 9 p.m., just as I was passing through Rawlins. 1 minute, the sky was clear, stars bright and cold overhead. The next minute, the wind picked up and the snow started falling so thick I could barely see 20 feet ahead. I slowed down to 45, then 40, watching the white line on the road's edge like it was a lifeline. The CB radio, mounted on my dash, crackled with static. Other drivers calling out conditions and warnings. Most of them were pulling over, waiting it out at rest stops or truck plazas. But I kept going. I had a deadline to make, and the load I was carrying, medical supplies headed for a hospital in North Platte, couldn't wait. That's when I first heard them on the CB. 3 voices, male, talking back and forth with the easy rhythm of drivers who'd been running together for years. A convoy moving east like me, somewhere ahead on the interstate. They were joking about the weather, comparing it to other storms they'd driven through, their voices warm and familiar through the speaker. It was comforting, knowing I wasn't alone out here, that there were other drivers crazy enough to keep pushing through this mess. "This ain't nothing," one of them said, his voice deep and gravelly. "Remember that ice storm in Montana, '09? Now that was a beast." The others laughed, agreeing, and I found myself smiling despite the tension in my shoulders. I keyed my mic, about to join the conversation, when the static surged and their voices cut out. When they came back a few seconds later, they were talking about something else, and the moment had passed. I drove on, the engine's steady rumble mixing with the howl of wind outside. The heater was cranked up high, but I could still feel the cold seeping in through the door seals, through the gap where the windshield met the frame. Ice was starting to form on the inside corners of the glass, little crystals that caught the dashboard lights and glittered like broken diamonds. I scraped at them with my thumbnail during a straight stretch of road, but they just came back, creeping across the glass in slow, intricate patterns. The convoy kept talking on the CB, their voices fading in and out with the static. I tried to spot their lights ahead of me, the familiar glow of taillights or running lights, but saw nothing except snow and darkness. The interstate stretched out empty and white, the center line disappearing under the accumulation. I should have been catching up to them by now, or at least seeing some sign they'd passed this way recently. Fresh tire tracks, displaced snow, something. But the road ahead looked untouched, like I was the first person to drive it in hours. "Anybody copy?" I said into the mic, keeping my voice casual. "This is Cal Reddington, eastbound at mile marker 215, looking for that convoy y'all were talking about." Static answered me, thick and buzzing. Then one of the voices came through, choppy and distant. "Copy that. We're about 10 miles ahead. Weather's getting worse." More static, then silence. I tried again, but got nothing except the empty hiss of dead air. The exit sign for a rest area appeared in my headlights, the reflective surface throwing the light back at me in a harsh glare. I thought about pulling off, taking a break, maybe calling Maeve to let her know the conditions were worse than expected. But something made me keep going. Pride, maybe, or stubbornness, or just the momentum of 17 years doing this job. I'd never failed to deliver a load on time, and I wasn't about to start now. So I drove past the exit and kept my eyes on the road, watching the snow pile up on my hood and listening to the rhythmic thump of the wipers struggling to keep the windshield clear. Around midnight, the road started to climb. I was getting into the higher elevations now, where the wind hit harder and the temperature dropped another 10 degrees. The snow was coming down so heavy that it formed a solid white wall in front of me, and I had to lean forward in my seat, squinting to make out the road. My hands ached from gripping the steering wheel, and my back was starting to cramp from the tension of holding the truck steady against the crosswinds that buffeted it from the side. That's when I saw the sign. It was just a flash at first. There and gone so quick I thought I'd imagined it. A green highway sign, the kind that marks exits, appearing in my headlights for just a split second before the snow swallowed it again. But something about it was wrong. The exit number, I couldn't quite make it out, but it wasn't one I recognized. And I knew this stretch of road like I knew my own face in the mirror. There were no exits between here and the next town, nothing but empty rangeland and fence posts for the next 30 miles. I slowed down even more, trying to catch another glimpse of the sign, but it was gone. Just snow and wind and the endless white road ahead. Maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe exhaustion was playing tricks on me, making me see things that weren't there. I'd been driving for 15 hours straight, after all, and the hypnotic rhythm of the wipers and the steady drone of the engine could mess with your head if you weren't careful. I shook myself, rolled down the window a crack to let in some cold air to help me stay alert, and kept driving. The CB crackled to life again, the convoy's voices cutting through the static. They were closer now, the signal stronger, and I could hear them clearly. "Taking the next exit," one of them was saying. "This storm's only getting worse, and I'm not risking the pass in these conditions." The others agreed, and I heard the characteristic sound of turn signals clicking in the background of their transmission. They were pulling off. Smart move, probably. I should do the same. But when I looked for exit signs, there was nothing. Just the empty road and the snow and the darkness pressing in from all sides. No lights from a truck stop or rest area. No glow of civilization anywhere on the horizon. The convoy kept talking, their voices describing the parking lot they were pulling into, the coffee they were going to get, the weather forecast they'd heard on the radio. But I couldn't see them. Couldn't see anything except the tunnel of light my headlights carved through the storm. "Where are you guys?" I asked into the mic, trying to keep the confusion out of my voice. "What exit did you take? I'm not seeing anything out here." Silence. Then that same deep, gravelly voice. "Exit 223. Can't miss it. Big truck plaza, fuel, food, the works." But I just passed mile marker 220, and there was no exit 223 on this stretch of interstate. I knew that for certain. Hadn't been one in all the years I'd been running this route. My heart started beating faster, a sick feeling spreading through my chest. Something was very wrong here. I grabbed the road atlas from the passenger seat, the old paper kind I still kept because sometimes GPS wasn't reliable out here in the middle of nowhere, and flipped to the Wyoming page. My finger traced Interstate 80, following it east from Rollins. Exit 219, exit 235, nothing in between except road. No exit 223, no truck plaza, nothing. Maeve? I tried dispatch instead, pressing the button on my phone that speed-dialed her direct line. It rang once, twice, then went to static. Not even voicemail, just a harsh buzzing that made me pull the phone away from my ear. I tried again with the same result. The cell signal indicator on my phone showed nothing. No bars, no service. I was completely cut off. The wind hit the truck broadside, a gust so strong it pushed me half a lane over before I could correct. I fought the wheel back, felt the tires slip on the ice underneath the snow, then catch again. My breath was coming faster now, shallow and quick. I needed to stop, needed to pull over and wait this out, but there was nowhere to go. The shoulder had disappeared under the drifts, and I couldn't tell where the road ended and the drainage ditch began. All I could do was keep moving forward, keep following the faint impression of the road beneath me, and hope the storm would break. The convoy was still talking on the CB, their voices warm and relaxed now, describing the coffee and the food and the warmth of the truck stop. But there was something off about their conversation, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. They were repeating themselves, the same jokes, the same stories about past storms, the same descriptions of the truck plaza, like a recording playing on a loop. I listened more carefully, counting the seconds between phrases, and realized they were cycling through the exact same dialogue every 3 minutes. Word for word, pause for pause. I reached for the CB, ready to turn it off, but my hand froze halfway there. Because ahead of me, just at the edge of my headlight's reach, I saw something. A shape in the snow, dark and massive, moving along the road in the same direction I was going. A truck. It had to be a truck. The back end of a trailer, maybe, or a sleeper cab. But there were no lights on it. No tail lights, no running lights, no reflective tape or markers. Just a dark, rectangular shape that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. I accelerated slightly, trying to close the distance, trying to see it more clearly. But the faster I went, the further away it seemed to get. Always there, always just at the edge of visibility, but never any closer. I flashed my high beams, hoping to illuminate it better, and for just a second I saw it clearly. A trailer, dark blue or maybe black, with no writing on it. No company logo, no DOT numbers, nothing. And then it was gone, swallowed by the snow as if it had never been there at all. My hands were shaking now, a tremor that ran from my fingers up through my wrists and into my forearms. I eased off the gas, letting the truck slow down to 35, then 30. The smart thing to do would be to stop. Just stop right here in the road, put on my flashers, and wait for the storm to pass. But something deeper than logic kept me moving. Some instinct that said stopping would be worse, that whatever was out here in the storm with me, it was waiting for me to stop. The CB crackled again, but this time the voices were different, distorted. The same words, but stretched out, lowered in pitch, like a recording played at half speed, and 10 miles ahead, weather's getting worse. The deep voice that had been warm and friendly now sounded hollow, empty, like it was coming from somewhere very far away, or very deep. "Can't miss it," the voice said, each syllable drawn out and wrong. "The works." I reached for the CB and switched it off. The sudden silence was almost worse than the voices had been. Now there was nothing but the wind and the engine and my own ragged breathing. I focused on the road, on keeping the truck between the lines I could barely see, on just making it through the next mile, and the next, until I could find somewhere safe to pull over. That's when I saw the sign again. The same green highway sign, appearing in my headlights exactly like before. But this time, I was ready for it, and I read it in the brief moment before it vanished. Exit 223, Truck Plaza, 1 mile. The same exit the convoy had mentioned, the exit that didn't exist. I kept driving, my eyes fixed on the spot where the sign had appeared, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. Road signs didn't just vanish. They were solid metal and reflective paint, anchored in concrete, lit up by headlights whether you wanted them to be or not. But this one had been there, and then it wasn't, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just witnessed something impossible. The truck's thermometer showed -8 degrees outside, but I was sweating. I could feel it beating on my forehead, running down my spine under my thermal shirt and heavy jacket. The heater was still cranked up high, pouring hot air into the cab, but it didn't help the chill that had settled into my bones. This wasn't the cold of winter weather. This was something else, something that came from inside, from the growing certainty that I was in serious trouble. I thought about my ex-wife, Sarah. Not the woman I'd divorced 3 years ago, bitter and tired of being alone while I spent weeks on the road, but the girl I'd married at 25, the one who used to stay up late when I called from truck stops, who'd laugh at my stories about weird customers and strange cargo and the 100 little adventures that came with this job. She'd always said I was too stubborn for my own good, that one day I'd push myself too far and end up in a situation even I couldn't handle. Maybe this was that day. The road curved slightly to the right, following the contour of the land, and I took it carefully, feeling the trailer shift behind me. The load I was carrying wasn't particularly heavy. Medical supplies rarely were. But it was fragile, and the last thing I needed was to jackknife on ice and end up with thousands of dollars worth of damaged equipment. I'd hauled enough loads to know exactly how my trailer would respond to different conditions. Could feel through the steering wheel and the seat of my pants when the tires were losing grip or when the weight was shifting wrong. Right now, everything felt normal, mechanically speaking. It was everything else that felt wrong. Mile marker 225 appeared in my headlights, the numbers clear despite the snow accumulating on the sign's face. I'd been tracking them obsessively for the past 20 minutes, watching for any gaps or irregularities, anything that might explain the phantom exit sign. But they'd all been there in order: 220, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, which meant I'd driven right past where exit 23 was supposed to be, and there'd been nothing. No off-ramp, no truck plaza, no lights except my own reflecting off the falling snow. The CB radio sat silent on my dash, the power light still glowing green even though I'd switched it off. I stared at it, waiting for it to crackle back to life with those distorted voices, but it stayed quiet. Maybe I'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe the stress and the storm and the long hours had combined to create some kind of auditory hallucination. That made more sense than the alternative. That I'd been listening to something that wasn't quite real. Voices from somewhere that didn't exist on any map. Movement in my side mirror caught my attention. I glanced at it, expecting to see nothing but snow and darkness, but there was something there. Lights. Not headlights coming up behind me, but something else. Red and white, flashing in a pattern that seemed almost random. They were distant, maybe half a mile back, barely visible through the storm. But they were there, and they were following the same road I was on. Relief flooded through me, warm and sudden. Another driver, someone else who'd been crazy enough or desperate enough to keep going through this mess. I wasn't alone out here after all. I watched the lights in the mirror, waiting for them to get closer, but they maintained their distance. Half a mile back, no closer, no further away, just keeping pace with me as I drove through the storm. I tried the CB radio again, switching it back on despite my earlier unease. Static greeted me, thick and buzzing. "This is Cal Reddington, eastbound on I-80 at mile marker 225, I said into the mic. "I've got visual on a vehicle behind me. If that's you, come back." The static continued, unchanging. I tried again, adjusting the squelch, flipping through channels. Nothing. Just that same empty hiss. The lights in my mirror flickered, and for a moment I thought they'd gone out completely. But then they came back, brighter now, and I could see them more clearly. Not truck lights. The pattern was wrong, too spread out, and the red seemed too intense, too pure, like emergency lights. Police or highway patrol, maybe, checking on vehicles that had been foolish enough to stay on the road in these conditions. I eased off the gas, expecting the vehicle to catch up to me, to pull alongside or signal me to pull over. But it stayed back, maintaining that same half-mile distance. The lights pulsed in my mirror, red and white, hypnotic in their rhythm. I watched them for a solid minute, 2 minutes, 3, and they never changed. Never got closer, never fell back, just stayed there like they were tethered to my truck by an invisible line. The radio on my phone crackled, startling me. Not a call, but the weather band, automatically activating with an alert. Winter storm warning in effect for Carbon and Albany counties until 6 a.m. The automated voice was choppy, breaking up with interference. Zero visibility reported, multiple road closures. Travelers are advised to... It cut out, replaced by static, then went silent. My phone screen showed no signal again. The weather app frozen on data from 3 hours ago. Ahead of me, something changed. The quality of the darkness shifted, became deeper somehow, more complete. And then I realized what it was. My headlights weren't reaching as far anymore. The beams that should have extended 100 yards or more were being absorbed after maybe 30 feet, swallowed by the storm or the night or something I didn't want to think about. I could see the snow falling in the immediate cone of light. Could see the road directly in front of my bumper, but beyond that was nothing but black. I slowed down to 25 miles per hour, then 20. This was getting dangerous. I needed to find somewhere to stop, to wait out the worst of the storm, even if it meant sitting on the shoulder with my flashers on. But when I started to ease toward the right, planning to pull off, the truck lurched. Not from ice or wind, but from something underneath. A jarring bump that rattled my teeth and sent the coffee in my cup holder sloshing over the rim. I corrected automatically, bringing the truck back to the center of the lane, and the ride smoothed out immediately. What had I hit? There was nothing on the interstate, no debris, no potholes big enough to cause that kind of impact. I checked my mirrors, looking for whatever I'd driven over, but saw only my own tracks already being filled in by the falling snow. And those lights, still hanging back there in the distance, still pulsing their steady red and white rhythm. The next time I tried to edge toward the shoulder, the same thing happened. A violent bump, like driving over a log or a curb, that forced me back to the center of the lane. I tried the left shoulder with the same result. The truck would only run smooth if I kept it in the middle of the road, equidistant from both edges. As if something was physically preventing me from pulling over. My heart was hammering now, a sick, rapid beat that made my hands shake on the wheel. This wasn't possible. Roads didn't work this way. Physics didn't work this way. I was tired, that was all. Exhausted and stressed and seeing things, feeling things that weren't real. I needed to stay calm, needed to think rationally. There was an explanation for all of this. There had to be. I thought back to the last truck stop I'd passed, a TA in Rollins where I'd fueled up just before the storm hit. Dustin Curvin had been working the service bay, a mechanic I'd known for years. We talked for a few minutes while he checked my tire pressure, shooting the breeze about the weather and the season, and how business was slow. "You be careful out there, Cal," he'd said as I was leaving. "This storm's supposed to be a bad one." Wouldn't surprise me if they closed the interstate before morning. I'd laughed it off, assured him I'd be fine. Now I wished I'd listened. The temperature gauge on my dash was dropping. -10 now, -12. The cold was seeping in through every crack and gap in the cab, forming ice on the inside of the windows faster than I could scrape it away. My breath came out in clouds, visible even in the dim glow of the dashboard lights. I cranked the heater up higher, but it didn't seem to make any difference. The cold just kept coming, steady and relentless, like the truck was losing its ability to hold it back. Mile marker 230 appeared and disappeared. Then 231. I was making progress at least, still moving forward even if I couldn't pull over. The lights behind me kept pace, neither gaining nor falling back, and I tried to take comfort in their presence even though they made no sense. Nothing made sense anymore. Not the phantom exit, not the looping voices on the CB, not the dark shape I'd seen in the road that had vanished like smoke. But I was still moving, still driving, and as long as I kept doing that, I'd eventually reach a town or a patrol station or somewhere with people and warmth and explanations. The CB radio crackled to life without me touching it. I stared at it, my hand frozen halfway to the power switch, as static filled the cab. Then, through the interference, I heard a voice, my voice. "This is Cal Reddington, eastbound on I-80 at mile marker 225. I've got visual on a vehicle behind me. If that's you, come back." The exact words I'd spoken minutes ago played back at me with perfect clarity. Then silence. I grabbed the mic with shaking hands. "Who is this?" My voice came out higher than I meant it to, strained with fear I couldn't quite hide. "How are you doing this?" Static answered me, and then, after a long pause, my voice again, asking the same question. "Who is this? How are you doing this?" Like an echo, but delayed, coming back to me from somewhere I couldn't identify. I switched the CB off again, forcefully this time, jabbing at the power button like I could kill whatever was on the other end of that signal. The radio went dark. For about 5 seconds. Then the power light came back on, glowing green in the darkness, and the static resumed as if I'd never touched it at all. I tried again with the same result. The CB wouldn't stay off. It kept coming back, kept filling the cab with that empty hiss that sounded like nothing and everything at once. "Maeve," I said out loud, talking to myself now, my voice shaking. "I need to get hold of Maeve." I grabbed my phone, tried her number again, but got the same static I'd heard before. Tried 911 and got nothing, not even a ring. The phone was useless out here, wherever here was. Because I was starting to think I wasn't on Interstate 80 anymore, not really. I'd driven off the map somehow, onto some version of the road that existed just slightly to the left of reality, where exit signs appeared and vanished, and voices on the radio echoed back at you from the void. The wind died. Just like that, between 1 second and the next, it went from howling to silent. The snow kept falling, thick and heavy, but without the wind it fell straight down, almost peaceful in the way it accumulated on my hood and windshield. The sudden quiet was unnerving. I could hear the truck's engine now, really hear it, every ping and knock and rattle that usually got lost in the general noise of driving. I could hear my own breathing, ragged and too fast. I could hear the scrape of the wipers across the glass, the soft tick of ice melting on the heater vents. And underneath all of that, I could hear something else, a sound so low, I felt it more than heard it. A vibration that came up through the seat and into my spine, like a deep hum, or a distant engine running at idle, or a voice trying to speak from very far away. It set my teeth on edge, made my skin crawl, and I couldn't tell if it was coming from outside the truck or inside it or from somewhere in between. The lights in my mirror flickered again, and this time when they came back they were closer. Not half a mile anymore, maybe a quarter mile. Still maintaining their distance, but a shorter distance now. Still pulsing that same red and white pattern. I watched them, fascinated and terrified in equal measure, as they held their new position. Closer, but not catching up. Following, but never arriving. Mile marker 235 passed by my window. I'd been driving for over an hour since I last saw another vehicle. Last, heard a voice on the CB that wasn't my own, or a distorted recording. The storm showed no signs of letting up, and my fuel gauge was dropping toward half a tank. I had enough to make it to North Platte, but only if I didn't get lost, didn't waste fuel driving in circles, or searching for an exit that might not exist. And I was starting to think that maybe making it to North Platte wasn't in the cards anymore. The dark shape appeared again, ahead and to the right. That same massive rectangular form, like a trailer without lights, moving along the road in the same direction I was going. But this time it was closer, maybe 50 yards ahead, and I could see it more clearly. It was a trailer, I was almost certain now, but wrong somehow. The proportions weren't quite right. Too tall or too wide or too... something I couldn't put my finger on. And it was absolutely black. Not dark blue or navy, but true black. The kind of black that seemed to pull light into it and refused to let it go. I eased off the gas, not wanting to get any closer to it, and the shape maintained its distance just like the lights behind me. 50 yards ahead, never getting further away, never letting me catch up. I was boxed in, I realized. Whatever was following me and whatever was leading me, they were keeping me on this road, keeping me moving forward at a steady pace toward a destination I couldn't see. The CB radio crackled with my voice again, but this time the words were different. "Help me," I heard myself say, the tone flat and emotionless despite the meaning of the words. "I'm lost. I don't know where I am. Someone please help me." I'd never said those things. Hadn't spoken them into the mic, hadn't even thought them clearly enough to articulate. But there was my voice saying them anyway, broadcasting them out into the storm where no one would hear. I looked down at the mic, still hanging on its coiled cord exactly where I'd left it. My hand was on the wheel. I hadn't touched the CB, but the voice continued, my words pouring out of the speaker. "The signs don't make sense. The road doesn't end. I've been driving for hours, and nothing changes. Where am I? Where am I going?" The shape ahead of me seemed to grow larger, to expand until it filled my entire field of vision. I couldn't see around it anymore, couldn't see past it to the road beyond. Just that black, rectangular mass, absorbing the light from my headlights, pulling at my eyes in a way that made me dizzy and sick. I wanted to look away, but couldn't. Wanted to slow down, but my foot wouldn't move on the pedal. Wanted to scream, but my throat was closed and tight and wouldn't make a sound. And then something hit the truck. Not a collision, not an impact with another vehicle or a barrier. Something struck the roof of the cab, a soft thump that I felt more than heard. Then another and another, a steady percussion like someone walking on top of the truck. But there was no one up there. There couldn't be. I was doing 20 miles an hour on a deserted highway in the middle of a snowstorm. There was nothing out here that could be on my roof. The thumps continued, moving from the front of the cab toward the back, and I heard something else. A scraping sound like claws or nails dragging across metal. My hands locked on the wheel, knuckles white, as whatever was up there moved along the length of the truck, over the cab and onto the trailer behind me. I didn't want to look up, didn't want to see what might be visible through the moonroof that I never used, that stayed covered by a shade I never opened. But my eyes went up anyway, drawn by a compulsion I couldn't resist. The shade was open. I didn't remember opening it, didn't remember touching it at all, and through the moonroof I could see the sky, or what should have been the sky. But instead of stars or clouds or the storm, there was only black. Pure, absolute black, so dark it hurt to look at. And in that darkness, something moved. Something large and slow, shifting like oil across water, blocking out even the faint illumination that should have come from somewhere, anywhere. I jerked the wheel to the left, a panicked reaction that sent the truck skidding sideways across the ice. The trailer began to swing out, the beginnings of a jackknife that would flip me over if I didn't correct immediately. I fought the wheel back, easing off the gas, letting the truck find its balance again. The scraping on the roof stopped. The thump stopped. And when I looked up again, the shade was closed, exactly as it had always been. I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the wheel. My breath came in short gasps that fogged the air in front of my face, freezing into tiny crystals that drifted down onto my lap. I needed to stop, needed to get out of the truck, needed to run, needed to do anything except keep driving toward whatever was waiting for me at the end of this road. But I couldn't stop. Every time I tried to pull over, something prevented it. I was trapped in motion, a prisoner in my own truck, following a route that had no ending. The lights behind me were closer now. Close enough that I could almost make out the vehicle they were attached to, almost see what had been following me for the past hour. But every time I focused on them in the mirror, they blurred and shifted, refusing to resolve into anything coherent. Red and white, pulsing, getting closer inch by inch, and I knew that if they ever caught up to me, if they ever pulled alongside or past me, something very bad would happen. The dark shape ahead disappeared, swallowed by the snow or fading back into whatever dimension it had come from. For a moment I was driving into empty space, nothing ahead except the storm and the road and the endless white. And then I saw the sign again, that same green highway sign, exit 223, appearing in my headlights like it had been waiting for me to notice it. But this time it didn't vanish. This time it stayed visible, solid and real, mounted on its posts just like any normal sign should be. And beyond it, I could see lights. Not the red and white of the vehicle behind me, but the warm yellow glow of sodium lamps, the bright white of fluorescent tubes, the multicolored shimmer of neon signs, a truck plaza, just like the voices on the CB had described, just like I'd been told. Exit 223, exactly where it wasn't supposed to be. I slowed down, the truck dropping to 15 miles per hour, then 10. The exit ramp appeared in my headlights, curving away to the right, leading down toward those welcoming lights. I could see buildings now, a fuel station and a restaurant and what looked like a motel. Trucks were parked in neat rows in the lot, their running lights glowing, their cabs dark as their drivers slept. It looked normal, it looked safe, it looked like exactly what I needed. My turn signal clicked in the silence, marking time with the truck's heartbeat. All I had to do was turn the wheel, follow the ramp down to the plaza, and this nightmare would be over. I'd be around people again, around light and warmth and sanity. I'd call Maeve, tell her I was stopping for the night, that the storm was too much to drive through. She'd understand. Hell, she'd probably be relieved. The lights behind me surged forward, suddenly close enough that I could see them clearly in my mirror for the first time. And what I saw made my blood turn to ice in my veins. They weren't truck lights or police lights or anything that belonged to a vehicle at all. They were windows, glowing from within with red and white light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Windows in something massive and dark that filled the road behind me, something that wasn't a truck or a car or anything I could name. I jerked the wheel to the right, taking the exit, and the truck's tires bit into the fresh snow on the ramp. Behind me, the lights, the windows, the thing, followed. turning onto the exit ramp with a grace and silence that nothing that size should have possessed. I accelerated, pushing the truck as fast as I dared down the curving ramp, desperate to reach those lights below, to get to the truck plaza and the illusory safety it offered. The ramp curved back on itself, a standard cloverleaf design, and I followed it around, the trailer swaying behind me but staying in line. Almost there. Just another 100 yards, and I'd be on level ground, pulling into the parking lot surrounded by other drivers who'd know what to do, who'd help me make sense of this. I could see the fuel pumps now, could read the price per gallon on the LED displays, could see a figure in a heavy jacket walking between the trucks, checking vehicles, looking completely normal and mundane and real. The ramp leveled out and I straightened the wheel, preparing to turn into the truck plaza's entrance. But as I did, the lights that had been so warm and inviting began to flicker. The sodium lamps dimmed and brightened and dimmed again. The fluorescent tubes stuttered. The neon signs buzzed and went dark. And in the space of 3 heartbeats, every light in the truck plaza went out. Darkness rushed in to fill the void, absolute and complete. The trucks I'd seen parked in neat rows were gone. The buildings were gone. The figure in the jacket was gone. There was nothing ahead of me except empty snow-covered ground and the ramp continuing forward into darkness. No truck plaza. No exit. Just the ramp leading nowhere, ending at a field of white that stretched out in all directions. I stood on the brakes, felt the ABS pulse under my foot as the truck slowed, and finally stopped. I sat there in the silence, engine idling, headlights illuminating snow and nothing else. Behind me, the thing with the glowing windows had stopped too, maintaining its distance, waiting. The CB radio crackled with my voice, still calling out for help, still describing my confusion and fear in that flat, emotionless tone. I was trapped between nothing and something worse than nothing, on an exit ramp that went nowhere, in a storm that would never end. And I realized, with a clarity that cut through all my fear and confusion, that I'd made a terrible mistake. I should never have left the interstate, should never have listened to the voices on the CB or looked for the truck plaza that didn't exist. Because now I was off the road, off the map, and I had no idea how to get back. I sat there for what felt like hours, though my watch said only 5 minutes had passed. The engine idled with a steady rhythm, burning fuel, the gauge creeping lower with each passing moment. I had maybe 300 miles of range left, enough to get back to the interstate and continue east if I could figure out how to reverse up the exit ramp without jackknifing. But the thought of going back out there, onto that endless dark road with whatever was following me, made my stomach turn over. The headlights showed nothing but snow and an empty field where the truck plaza should have been. I tried to make sense of it, tried to find some rational explanation for what I'd just witnessed. A power outage, maybe. A trick of the storm that had made me misjudge the distance. But I knew those were lies. Desperate attempts by my mind to explain something that had no explanation. The truck plaza had vanished because it had never been real in the first place. It had been bait, a lure to get me off the interstate, and I'd taken it. Behind me, the thing with the glowing windows remained motionless, a dark mass at the top of the exit ramp. I couldn't see it clearly in my mirrors, couldn't make out any detail beyond the general impression of size and wrongness, but I could feel it there, could sense its presence like a weight pressing down on the back of my neck. It was waiting for me to move, to make a decision, to do something other than sit here in neutral burning diesel. I reached for my phone again, knowing it was useless but needing to try anyway. Still no signal. The screen showed my last known location as Rollins, over 100 miles back, the GPS arrow spinning slowly in place like it was trying to figure out where I'd gone. The battery was at 30%, dropping faster than it should. I turned the screen off to conserve power, though I wasn't sure why it mattered. If I was going to die out here in the snow, whether my phone had battery or not seemed like a minor concern. The CB radio continued its intermittent broadcasts, my voice cutting through the static to describe situations I hadn't experienced yet. "The engine's dying," I heard myself say. "I can't keep it running. It's getting so cold." I looked at the temperature gauge. The truck was running fine, the engine temperature right where it should be. But I shivered anyway, because I knew that voice was right. Eventually, the fuel would run out, and then the engine would stop, and then the heater would fail, and I'd be alone in the cab with nothing but the cold and the dark and whatever was out there waiting. I put the truck in reverse, deciding I had to at least try to get back to the interstate. The transmission clunked as I eased off the clutch, and the truck started rolling backward, up the slight incline of the exit ramp. I watched my mirrors carefully, trying to stay centered on the ramp, trying to avoid the shoulders that might drop off into ditches, or barriers, or nothing at all. The thing with the windows didn't move, just sat there at the top of the ramp, watching me approach. 20 yards separated us now, then 15, then 10. I could see it more clearly, could make out what looked like a massive rectangular structure, taller than a semi-trailer, with those glowing windows arranged in 2 rows along its side. But the proportions were all wrong. The angles too sharp, or too soft, or too something my brain couldn't quite process. It hurt to look at directly, made my eyes water and my head ache. So I relied on my mirrors, keeping it in my peripheral vision while I focused on the ramp. 5 yards. 3. And then I was level with it, the truck's trailer passing within arm's reach of whatever it was. I didn't look directly at it, kept my eyes forward, but I could see it there in my side mirror, could see those windows pulsing with their red and white light, could see something moving behind the windows, shadows that shifted and flowed like they were underwater or caught in a heat haze. I pressed the gas harder, feeling the engine strain as I backed up the incline. The thing didn't move, didn't react to my presence at all. And then I was past it, back at the top of the ramp, and I could see the interstate ahead. The road was still there, still running east-west through the darkness, still covered in snow. Relief flooded through me so intensely it made me dizzy. I'd found my way back. I could get back on the road and keep driving, and maybe, this nightmare would end. I shifted into first gear and pulled forward, guiding the truck back onto the interstate. The tires gripped, the trailer followed, and just like that, I was back in the eastbound lane, headlights pointed toward Nebraska and the promise of morning. Behind me, the exit ramp receded into the darkness, and the thing with the windows didn't follow. It stayed there at the entrance to nowhere, watching me go, and I felt its attention like a physical touch between my shoulder blades. The convoy voices started up again on the CB, back to their original loop, describing the truck plaza and the coffee and how they were going to wait out the storm. But they sounded faint now, distant, like they were broadcasting from very far away. I listened to them cycle through their conversation twice more, then switched the radio off. This time it stayed off, the power light going dark and remaining dark. Whatever had been playing games with me seemed to have lost interest. Mile marker 236 appeared in my headlights. Then, 237, I was making progress, putting distance between myself and the phantom exit, and that had to mean something. Had to mean I was getting back to normal reality, to the regular road that existed on maps and GPS systems. My hands had stopped shaking, and my breathing had slowed to something approaching normal. I was going to make it. I was going to deliver this load and collect my pay and never, ever take a run through Wyoming in winter again. That's when I saw the sign for exit 223 ahead. My foot came off the gas involuntarily, the truck slowing as I stared at the green sign illuminated in my headlights. Exit 223, Truck Plaza, 1 mile. The same exit I'd just left. The same exit that shouldn't exist. But I'd driven past it. I'd put it behind me. I'd seen mile markers 236 and 237, which meant I was well past where any exit 223 could be. I looked at my odometer, trying to make sense of the numbers. I'd driven 2.3 miles since getting back on the interstate. Should be at mile marker 238 by now, maybe 239. But the sign said 220. I was back where I'd been an hour ago before I'd seen the exit the first time. The distance I'd covered, all the miles I'd put between myself and Rollins, had somehow disappeared. I was caught in a loop, driving the same stretch of road over and over, and I hadn't even realized it until now. Panic hit me then, real and visceral, tightening my chest until I couldn't breathe. I was trapped, not just on this road, but in this moment, this piece of time and space that kept repeating itself like a scratched record skipping on the same groove. I could drive for days and never get anywhere. Never escape this endless loop of snow and darkness and exit 223. I grabbed the phone, stabbed at Maeve's number with shaking fingers. The call connected this time, the ringing clear and normal in my ear. Hope surged through me. She answered on the third ring. "Cal?" Her voice was fuzzy with sleep. "What time is it? Are you okay?" "Maeve, I need help." The words tumbled out too fast. "I'm stuck in some kind of loop on I-80. The same exit keeps appearing, the same mile markers, I can't get past it. There's something following me, something wrong with the road. I don't know what to do." Silence on the other end. Then, "Cal, you're not making sense. Where are you exactly?" "I don't know. That's what I'm trying to tell you. The GPS says Rollins, but I've been driving for hours. Mile marker 220, 225, back to 220 again. It's not possible, but it's happening." More silence. When Maeve spoke again, her voice was gentle, the tone you'd use with someone who was having a breakdown. "Cal, have you been drinking or taking any medication? You sound really stressed." "I'm not drunk. I'm not crazy. There's something wrong with this road, Maeve. I've seen things, impossible things, and I can't get away from them. Okay, listen to me carefully. I need you to pull over somewhere safe and rest. You've been driving too long, you're exhausted, and the storm is probably worse than you realized. Find a truck stop, get some sleep, and we'll figure this out in the morning." There are no truck stops. That's what I'm telling you. The one I tried to stop at disappeared. It vanished right in front of me. "Cal, please, Maeve, please believe me. Something is very wrong out here." The line crackled, static creeping into the connection. Maeve's voice came through in pieces. "Can't hear you, breaking up. Call back when..." And then nothing. Dead air. I looked at the phone screen and saw the call had lasted 43 seconds. 43 seconds of contact with the real world, with someone who existed outside this nightmare, and it hadn't been enough. She thought I was losing my mind. Maybe I was. The dark shape appeared ahead of me again, that trailer-like mass that absorbed light instead of reflecting it. It was closer this time, maybe 30 yards ahead, and it was moving slower than before. I could tell because I was gaining on it, even though I hadn't increased my speed. In another minute I'd be right behind it, close enough to read license plates if it had any, close enough to see what it really was. I didn't want to know. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to slow down, to maintain distance, to avoid getting any closer to that thing than absolutely necessary. But the truck kept rolling forward at a steady 25 miles per hour, and the shape kept slowing down, and the gap between us narrowed yard by yard. 20 yards, 15. I could see details now, or what looked like details. The back of the thing had a door or an opening, a rectangular darkness even blacker than the surrounding mass. And around that opening I could see what looked like text, white letters on the black surface. I squinted, trying to read them, trying to make out what they said. Maeve Hollister Transport. My hands locked on the wheel. My company didn't have trucks like this. Didn't have any trucks at all, actually. We were a brokerage, connecting drivers with loads, managing logistics. Maeve ran the whole operation out of a 2-room office in Cheyenne with a secretary and a lot of phone calls. We didn't own equipment. We didn't operate vehicles. We sure as hell didn't have black trailers with our name written on them. 10 yards. The text was clearer now, and below the company name I could see a dot number. My dot number. The same 7-digit sequence that was on my truck, on my paperwork, on every bill of lading I'd signed in the past 3 years. This thing, whatever it was wearing my identity like a disguise. I jerked the wheel to the left, pulling into the westbound lane to get away from it. The truck responded sluggishly, the trailer swaying as I changed lanes. But as I moved left, the dark shape moved with me, matching my trajectory exactly. I tried to go back right and it followed, staying directly ahead of me no matter what I did. I was locked onto it somehow, tethered to it, and the distance between us kept shrinking. 5 yards. 4. Close enough now that I could see my headlights reflecting off something on the back of the trailer. Not the surface itself, which still seemed to drink in the light, but something embedded in it. Reflectors, maybe, or lights of its own. They glowed red, not from my headlights but from some internal source, and they were arranged in a pattern I recognized. Tail lights, marker lights, clearance lights. All in the right places, all the right shapes, but all the wrong color. Only red, no white or amber, just red like warning lights or emergency flashers or blood. 3 yards. I could see under the trailer now, could make out what looked like wheels and axles and an undercarriage, but they weren't moving. The whole thing was gliding along the road without its wheels turning, without making contact with the ground. It was floating, hovering, maintaining a precise distance above the snow-covered asphalt. 2 yards, and that's when I saw the door at the back of the trailer start to open. Not swinging outward on hinges like a normal trailer door, but sliding upward like a roll-up gate, revealing the interior. I tried to look away, tried to focus on the road or my mirrors or anything except what was being revealed. But my eyes wouldn't move. They stayed fixed on that opening, on the darkness inside that was somehow darker than the outside, on whatever was in there waiting to be seen. The interior of the trailer wasn't empty. It was full of windows. The same glowing windows I'd seen on the thing that had followed me down the exit ramp, arranged in 2 rows along each side, pulsing with red and white light. And in front of those windows, silhouetted against their glow, I could see figures. Human-shaped, standing motionless, 3 or 4 dozen of them at least. They were all facing forward, facing me, and even though I couldn't see their features, I knew they were watching. 1 yard. Close enough that I could have reached out my window and touched the back of the trailer if I'd wanted to. Close enough to see that the figures inside weren't quite right. Their proportions slightly off, their poses too rigid, their shapes too uniform. They looked like people the same way a mannequin looks like people, similar enough to be recognizable but wrong enough to be disturbing. And then one of them moved. Just a small shift, a turning of the head, but it was enough. The figure at the front of the trailer, closest to the opening, rotated its head toward me and I saw its face. My face, looking back at me from inside that impossible vehicle, wearing my features like a mask, eyes empty and dark and utterly without recognition. I screamed, couldn't help it, couldn't stop it. The sound tore out of my throat raw and ragged, filling the cab, drowning out the engine and the static in my own racing heartbeat. I slammed on the brakes, not caring if I jackknifed, not caring if I flipped the truck, just needing to stop, to get away from what I'd seen. The tires locked up and the truck began to skid, sliding sideways on the ice. The dark trailer didn't slow down. It kept moving forward at its steady pace, pulling away from me as I skidded to a halt. The door remained open, the figures inside still visible, and I saw more of them turn their heads to look at me as the distance grew. All of them wearing faces I recognized. Dustin Curvin, the mechanic from Rollins. The other drivers I'd seen at truck stops over the years. And in the back row, barely visible in the dim light, I saw Maeve, or something wearing her face, standing among the others, watching me with those same empty eyes. The truck stopped completely, slewed sideways across both lanes, and I sat there shaking so hard my teeth rattled. The dark trailer continued down the road, the door sliding slowly closed, cutting off my view of the interior. It shrank in the distance, got smaller and smaller, and finally disappeared around a curve I didn't remember being there before. I was alone on the road again. Just me and the snow and the endless night. The CB radio crackled to life with my voice, describing what I'd just seen, putting my terror into words. They're inside the trailer. All of them. Everyone I've ever known on this road. They're all in there, and they're all watching me. What are they? What do they want? I didn't have answers. Didn't think there were answers, at least not ones that would make sense or provide comfort. All I knew was that I was caught in something far beyond my understanding, something that used faces and voices and familiar things to disguise its true nature. And it wasn't going to let me go. The mile marker in my headlights said 220. I was back at the beginning of the loop. Again. I put the truck in gear and started driving. What else could I do? Sitting still meant freezing, meant dying, meant giving up. And I wasn't ready to give up, not yet. So I drove, following the white lines that appeared and disappeared under the snow, keeping my speed steady, trying not to think about what I'd seen or what it meant. Trying to focus on the simple act of driving, on the familiar motions of steering and shifting and watching the road. Mile marker 221. The convoy voices had stopped, the CB silent except for faint static. The temperature outside had dropped to -15, and the cold was seeping into the cab despite the heater running full blast. I could see my breath in the air, could feel ice forming on my eyelashes when I blinked. Mile marker 222. Something was different this time. I could feel it, a change in the quality of the air or the texture of the storm. The snow was falling lighter now, the individual flakes larger and slower. I could see further ahead, maybe 40 or 50 yards instead of the usual 20. The darkness seemed less absolute, like there was a faint light source somewhere beyond the storm. Too distant to illuminate but close enough to suggest that dawn might eventually come. Mile marker 223. The exit sign appeared right on schedule, exactly where it had been every other time. Exit 223, Truck Plaza, 1 mile. But I didn't slow down, didn't consider taking it. I'd learned that lesson already. The exit led nowhere, offered nothing except a different flavor of trap. I kept driving, kept my eyes forward, and watched the sign recede in my mirror. And that's when I heard the voice on the CB. Not my voice this time, not the convoy's looping dialogue. A new voice crackling through the static, faint but clear enough to make out. Truck on I-80 eastbound. This is Nebraska State Patrol. Come back. I grabbed the mic so fast I nearly dropped it. This is Cal Reddington. I copy. I copy. My voice was hoarse from screaming, from fear, from hours of breathing cold, dry air. I need help. I'm trapped in some kind of loop. I can't get off this road. There's something following me. Static, then Copy that. Severe weather. Road closed at mile marker 245. Need to turn around. I can't turn around. Every time I try to go back, I end up in the same place. Mile marker 220. Over and over. How do I get out of this? Say again. You're breaking up. Location. Mile marker 223. I'm at 223 heading east, and I've been driving in circles for hours. Please, you have to help me. The static changed, became thicker, more oppressive. And through it, I heard something that made my blood run cold. The state patrol voice was still talking, but it was being overtaken by another voice, my voice, speaking the same words I'd just said, but with that flat, emotionless tone that meant it wasn't really me. Mile marker 223. I'm at 223, heading east, and I've been driving in circles for hours. Please, you have to help me. No, I whispered. No, that was real. That was a real person. They were trying to help. But the voice on the CB kept going, kept repeating my words with exact precision, and I knew the truth. There was no state patrol. There was no help coming. There was only this road and this storm and whatever intelligence was out here playing with me like a cat with a mouse. I dropped the mic, and it swung on its cord, bouncing against my leg. Mile marker 224. Then 225. The landmarks kept passing. The numbers kept climbing, and for a brief moment I let myself hope that maybe I'd broken free. Maybe I was finally making progress. But when marker 230 appeared, I knew what was coming next. I'd been here before, done this before, was caught in a cycle I couldn't escape. Mile marker 220, I was back at the start. The third time, or maybe the fourth, I'd lost count. How long had I been driving? My watch said 2 a.m., but I'd left Rollins at 8 p.m., which meant I'd been on the road for 6 hours. But it felt longer than that. Felt like days or weeks, like time itself was broken out here in the storm. The dark trailer appeared ahead of me again, the same as before, but also different. This time, it wasn't moving. It was parked on the shoulder, door closed, no lights showing. Just a dark shape barely visible against the snow, and I would have driven past it without noticing, except something made me slow down. Some morbid curiosity or desperate need for answers that overrode my fear. I pulled up alongside it, keeping my truck in the lane, and looked out my side window. The trailer was exactly what I'd thought. A standard semi-trailer, dark-colored, with text on the side that I couldn't quite read in the poor light. I grabbed my flashlight from the door pocket and shined it across the gap. Reddington Freight. My name. My DOT number. My old company logo, the one I'd stopped using 3 years ago when I went independent and started working exclusively for Maeve's brokerage. This trailer belonged to a version of me that didn't exist anymore. To a business I'd shut down when my marriage fell apart and I couldn't afford to keep running my own authority. I kept the flashlight beam moving, scanning the length of the trailer. It looked real, solid, covered in road grime and snow like any normal truck. The wheels were touching the ground, the suspension compressed under a loaded weight. I could see the glad hands hanging from the airlines, the electrical cable coiled on its hook, all the normal details that made up a trailer's rear end. And then the back door started to open. I didn't wait to see what was inside. I hit the gas, and the truck lurched forward, tires spinning for a moment before catching. I watched my side mirror as the trailer receded behind me, watched that door roll up slowly and deliberately, revealing the darkness within. But this time I didn't see windows or figures or anything except pure, black emptiness. A void that seemed to pull at my eyes even from a distance. Mile marker 221. I was moving again, driving again, caught in the loop again. My fuel gauge read a quarter tank now. I'd burned through 3/4 of my fuel going nowhere, driving in circles, and soon I'd run out completely. And then what? Sit here and freeze while that thing with my name on it sat outside my window waiting? The CB crackled. Maeve's voice came through, clear and normal and wrong. "Cal, where are you? You should have checked in 2 hours ago. I'm getting worried." I stared at the radio, knowing this wasn't real, knowing it was the same trick that had been played on me over and over. But hearing her voice, hearing that note of concern, it broke something inside me. I grabbed the mic. "Maeve, if you can really hear me, if this is really you, I need you to know something. I'm not going to make this delivery. I'm stuck out here, and I don't think I'm getting out. Tell my ex-wife." I stopped. What could I tell her? That I was sorry? That I wished I'd been a better husband? That I loved her even though we'd signed papers and moved on and rebuilt our lives apart? None of it mattered now. "Tell her I was thinking about her at the end," I said finally. "Tell her the good times, the early years before it all went bad. Tell her those were real and I never forgot them." Silence from the CB. Then, in a voice that was Maeve, but also not Maeve, too measured and careful to be human. "Understood. Message will be delivered. Stay safe out there, Cal." The radio went dead. I let the mic drop, felt tears freezing on my cheeks, and drove on into the loop that had become my entire world. The snow had stopped falling. I noticed it somewhere around my 5th or 6th trip through the loop, though I'd long since stopped counting. The flakes that had been constant for hours just quit, leaving the air clear and still and empty. I could see further now, could make out the landscape on either side of the road. Hills covered in white, fence posts marking old property lines, nothing moving except my truck's shadow cast by my own headlights. The silence was worse than the wind had been. At least with the storm there'd been sound, motion, something to mark the passage of time. Now there was only the engine's steady rumble and the hum of my tires on the snow-packed road. The CB radio had gone completely dead. Not even static anymore, just a silent speaker and a dead power light. My phone had died 20 minutes ago, the battery finally giving up, leaving me with no connection to the outside world at all. Mile marker 220 appeared in my headlights for what might have been the 10th time, or the 20th. I'd lost track, lost the ability to care. The fear had burned itself out, leaving behind a hollow exhaustion that made everything feel distant and unreal. I was watching myself drive from somewhere far away, observing my own hands on the wheel, my own foot on the gas, like I was spectating my own life. The dark trailer was parked in the same spot again, right where it had been before. But this time there were others with it. 5 or 6 trailers, all dark, all identical, all bearing my name and company logo. They lined the shoulder like monuments or grave markers, and as I drove past each one, their doors began to open. Not all at once, but in sequence, each one waiting for me to draw level before rolling up to reveal the darkness inside. I didn't look, kept my eyes forward, kept driving, ignored the CB even though it had come back to life and was broadcasting my voice in dozens of variations, describing scenarios I hadn't experienced yet. "The engine just died. I'm out of fuel. It's so cold. I can't feel my hands anymore. Something's trying to get into the cab. The door handle is turning. I can't stop it. I can't." Mile marker 221. The convoy voices had returned too, but they weren't looping anymore. They were having a real conversation, or what sounded like one, talking about me. "Poor bastard," the deep, gravelly voice said. "How long's he been out here now?" "Hard to say," another voice answered. "Time's funny on this stretch. Could be hours, could be days. Think he'll figure it out? Eventually. They all do. Or they don't, and they just keep driving until they run out of gas. Either way, the road gets what it wants." I grabbed the mic, needing to confront them. needing answers even if they wouldn't make sense. What does that mean? What does the road want? Why is this happening to me? The voices stopped. Complete silence for maybe 5 seconds. Then the gravelly voice came back, but it was talking to the others, not to me. He can hear us now. That's new. Means he's close, almost there. Should we tell him? Why not? Won't change anything. I waited, hands trembling on the wheel, for whatever revelation they were going to offer. The answer to this nightmare, the explanation that would make it all make sense. But when the voice came through again, all it said was, "Check your mirror, Cal. Look at what's been following you this whole time." I didn't want to. Every instinct told me that looking would be a mistake, that some things were better left unseen. But I looked anyway, because what did I have to lose at this point? The mirrors showed the same thing they'd been showing for hours. The road behind me, the falling snow that had started up again, and in the distance, those pulsing red and white lights. Except they were closer now, much closer. Close enough that I could see the vehicle they were attached to, and it wasn't a vehicle at all. It was the thing I'd seen on the exit ramp, that massive structure with its rows of glowing windows, but it had changed, grown. The windows had multiplied, covering the entire surface. Hundreds of them now, maybe thousands, each one containing a figure. Each figure wearing a face I knew. I saw my ex-wife standing in one window, my mother in another. Maeve, Dustin. Every dispatcher I'd ever talked to, every dock worker who'd loaded my trailer, every other driver I'd shared a meal or a conversation with at a truck stop over the past 17 years. All of them arranged in neat rows, all watching me with those empty, recognitionless eyes. And at the very front, in the largest window, I saw myself. Not a reflection, not a copy, but me as I'd been 6 hours ago, pulling out of Rollins, young and confident and stupid enough to think I could outrun a storm. He was smiling, that version of me, and he was pointing forward, urging me on, telling me to keep driving. "What is this?" I asked the CB, my voice breaking. "What are you showing me?" "The road remembers everyone who's driven it," the gravelly voice said. "Every trip, every mile, every moment. You've been part of it for 17 years, Cal. You think all those hours you spent out here just disappeared? This is where they've been all along, waiting, accumulating, building up like interest in a bank account you forgot you had." Mile marker 222. The thing behind me was keeping pace now, matching my speed exactly, neither gaining nor falling back. I could feel its weight pressing down on the road, could feel the way it bent reality around it just by existing. And I understood, with a clarity that was almost painful, what was happening. I wasn't driving in a loop. I was driving in a spiral, circling down towards something, and with each rotation I was getting closer to the center, closer to where the road wanted me to be, closer to joining all those other faces in those windows, becoming another memory trapped in amber, preserved forever in this strange pocket of existence that sat just slightly to the left of the real world. "How do I get out?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "You don't," the voice said, and it sounded almost sympathetic. "Nobody does. The road doesn't let go once it's got you. You're already part of it, Cal. Have been since the first time you drove this stretch. Every subsequent trip just reinforced the connection, made it stronger. Tonight, it finally got strong enough to pull you all the way in." Mile marker 223. The exit sign appeared, right on schedule, but this time I saw something else. A second sign behind it, smaller, half hidden by the snow. I slowed down to read it, and felt my heart sink as I made out the words Maeve Hollister, Memorial Rest Area, 1 mile. Memorial. That word hit me like a punch to the gut. I grabbed my dead phone, tried to turn it on through sheer force of will. It flickered to life for just a moment, long enough for me to see the date on the screen. February 15th, 2024. 2 years in the future from when I'd started this trip. 2 years I'd spent driving this same stretch of road, over and over, burning time the same way I'd burned fuel. The phone died again, but I didn't need it anymore. I understood now. Maeve was dead, had been dead, would be dead. The business was gone. My old life was gone. I was a ghost driving a ghost truck on a ghost road, and I'd been doing it for so long I'd forgotten what it was like to be real. When did I die? I asked the CB. No answer, just static, soft and patient, waiting for me to figure it out on my own. I drove on, watching the mile markers count up. 224, 225, 226. The thing behind me had pulled up alongside now, matching my speed exactly, and I could see into the windows clearly. All those faces watching me. And I realized they weren't empty or emotionless at all. They were sad, grieving, mourning for what they'd lost and where they'd ended up. I looked at the window closest to me and saw Dustin Curvin. He was moving now, no longer frozen, and he was mouthing words I couldn't hear. But I could read his lips well enough to make them out. "I'm sorry, Cal. I'm so sorry. I tried to warn you." "Warn me about what?" I said out loud, but I already knew. The last time I'd seen him, fueling up in Rollins, he'd told me to be careful. Had said the storm was bad, that they might close the interstate. But there'd been something else in his eyes, something I'd been too busy to notice. Fear. Recognition. The look of someone watching history repeat itself, knowing it was going to end badly and powerless to stop it. How many other drivers had he seen leave that truck stop and never come back? How many times had he fueled up a ghost truck, made small talk with a ghost driver, watched them pull out onto this cursed stretch of road? And now he was here too, trapped in his own window, paying for whatever sin or mistake had bound him to this place. Mile marker 230. The landscape was changing. The hills were flattening out, the fence posts disappearing, the snow giving way to bare asphalt. I was approaching the end of the loop, the point where it would curve back on itself and reset to mile marker 220. But this time felt different. Final. Like I was being given a choice, even if it was just the illusion of one. "What happens if I keep driving?" I asked the CB. The gravelly voice came back, clearer than it had ever been. "You loop again, and again, and again until you forget there was ever anything else, until this road, this storm, this night becomes your entire existence. That's one option. And the other? You take the exit, you pull into the rest area. You park next to all the other trucks that are already there, and you turn off your engine, and you wait. Eventually, you'll become part of the structure, another window in the collection. You'll still be conscious, still aware, but you won't be driving anymore. You'll just be watching, remembering, existing in a moment that never moves forward or back." Neither option sounded good, but at least the second one had an ending, a conclusion, even if it wasn't the one I would have chosen. Mile marker 235. Almost there, almost to the reset point. I could feel the loop getting ready to kick in, could sense the road preparing to send me back to the beginning. My fuel gauge showed empty, the low fuel warning light glowing red on the dashboard. I had maybe 5 more miles left, maybe less. Not enough to do another loop. This was it, the end. "There's a third option," a new voice said on the CB. Female, familiar, warm in a way that made my chest ache. I knew that voice, had heard it 1,000 times over the years, Trusted it more than I trusted my own judgment sometimes. "Maeve?" I whispered. "Hey, Cal," she said, and I could hear her smiling through the static. "Took you long enough to get here. Are you dead?" "Yeah, heart attack, about 18 months ago. Right at my desk, middle of coordinating a 3-truck convoy to Denver. They said I went quick, didn't suffer. I guess that's supposed to be comforting." She paused, and I heard something that might have been a sigh or might have been interference. "But I didn't really go anywhere, Cal. None of us do. We're all still here in one way or another." "I don't understand." "The road keeps us. The people who gave it the most, who spent the most time on it, who cared about it even when we shouldn't have. It holds on to us, preserves us. And when someone like you comes along, someone who's worn out the same stretch too many times, who's become more road than person, it pulls them in too." Mile marker 238. Just 2 more until the loop reset. I felt tears running down my face, freezing on my cheeks before they could fall. "You said there was a third option." "There is, but you're not going to like it." "Tell me anyway." "You let go, stop driving. Just take your hands off the wheel and your foot off the gas, and let the truck do what trucks do when nobody's controlling them. It'll drift, maybe hit the shoulder, maybe roll. And when it stops moving, when the engine dies and the lights go out and there's nothing left but you and the cold and the dark, that's when you'll finally be free." "Free to do what? Die for real this time?" "Maybe. Or maybe you'll wake up somewhere else, in a time that hasn't happened yet, or a version of events that went differently. The road has a lot of ways in, Cal, but it's only got one way out. You have to choose to leave. Have to want it badly enough to let go of everything you know." Mile marker 239. One more. One more marker, and I'd be back at 220, starting the loop again, unless I did something to break the cycle. I looked at my hands on the wheel, at the calluses on my palms from 17 years of gripping the same worn leather. Looked at the dashboard lights that had been my constant companions through thousands of miles and hundreds of nights exactly like this one. Looked in the mirror at that massive structure with all its windows, at all those faces watching me, waiting to see what I'd choose. "If I let go," I said slowly, "what happens to them? To all the others who are already trapped?" "Nothing changes for them," Maeve said, and there was genuine sadness in her voice. "They're already gone, Cal. This is all they have left. But you're still on the edge. Still got one foot in the real world and one in here. You can still choose." Mile marker 240. The loop should have reset by now, should have sent me back to 220, but the marker just kept climbing. 200. Show 142. I was past the boundary into territory I'd never reached before, and ahead of me I could see something glowing on the horizon. Not the false lights of the truck plaza, but something real. Dawn, maybe, or a town, or the actual exit that led to actual North Platte where I was supposed to deliver my actual load. The structure beside me was falling behind, unable or unwilling to follow past the loop's boundary. I watched it recede in my mirrors, watched all those faces grow smaller and smaller, and I felt something break inside my chest. They were staying behind. All of them. Maeve, Dustin, the convoy drivers, all the others who'd been pulled into this strange pocket of existence. They were trapped here while I drove on toward whatever came next. "Goodbye, Cal," Maeve said, her voice fading with distance. "Drive safe, watch the weather. Call when you get a chance." "I will," I said, though I knew she couldn't hear me anymore. "I promise." Mile marker 245. According to the voice I'd heard earlier, the one claiming to be Nebraska State Patrol, this was where the road closed, where they'd set up barricades to keep drivers from going further into the storm. But there was nothing here. Just empty road and the approaching dawn, and my truck still rolling forward on momentum and the last fumes of diesel. The engine coughed, sputtered. The fuel warning light was flashing now, urgent and insistent, telling me what I already knew. I was out of fuel, out of time, out of road. In another minute or two, the truck would roll to a stop and I'd be stranded here, wherever here was. Dead or alive, real or ghost, trapped or free. I had no idea which. I could take my hands off the wheel right now. Could let go like Maeve had suggested. Could choose to leave. Could find out what was on the other side of this nightmare. Or I could ride it out, coast as far as the momentum would take me, see if the dawn ahead was real or just another trick of the road. The engine died. The dashboard lights flickered and went out. The heater stopped blowing. In the sudden silence, I could hear my own heartbeat, fast and erratic, and I realized I was holding my breath. The truck was still moving, but barely, rolling forward at maybe 10 miles an hour on flat ground with no power to maintain it. 5 miles an hour. 3. The shoulder was coming up on my right. A place to pull over, to stop, to rest. I could guide the truck there, use the last of its momentum to get off the road, to park safely. Or I could let it drift, let physics and chance decide where I ended up. My hands loosened on the wheel, just slightly, just enough that the truck began to pull to the right on its own, following the crown of the road, heading towards the shoulder. I felt the tires leave the pavement, felt the subtle change in resistance as they hit the snow, felt the truck begin to slow down even faster. 1 mile an hour, half a mile an hour. Almost stopped. The first light of dawn was painting the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold, and in that light I could see the real world coming back into focus. Real snow, real hills, real fence posts, and ahead, maybe a quarter mile up the road, I could see lights. Red and blue, flashing in the early morning gloom. Real police lights, real patrol cars. Real people who existed in real time and could help me understand what had just happened. The truck stopped. The engine was dead. The cab was silent. And I was stranded on the shoulder of Interstate 80 in Wyoming at dawn after the longest night of my life. But I was here. I was real. And when I opened the door and climbed down from the cab, when my feet hit the ground and I felt the cold bite of winter air on my face, I knew with absolute certainty that I'd made it out. A figure was walking toward me from the patrol cars, a state trooper in a heavy jacket, flashlight in hand. He raised it as he approached, checking me out, making sure I was okay. "You all right, sir?" he called out. "We've had this stretch closed for 6 hours. How'd you even get past the barricades?" "I don't know," I said, and it was the truth. "I've been driving all night. I got turned around in the storm, lost track of where I was." He looked at my truck, at the empty fuel gauge visible through the windshield, at the frost covering every surface. "You're lucky you didn't freeze out here. Come on, let's get you into the patrol car where it's warm. We'll figure out how to get you towed and refueled." I followed him, glancing back at my truck one last time. It looked normal, just a regular semi sitting on the shoulder, no different from thousands of others. But in the side mirror, just for a second, I thought I saw something. A reflection of lights that weren't there. Windows glowing red and white in the pre-dawn darkness. And then it was gone, and there was just my truck and the road, and the morning coming on like a promise that maybe I'd actually get to keep. I climbed into the warm patrol car and listened to the trooper call for a tow truck on his radio, and I tried to believe that this was real, that I'd really escaped, that I wasn't still driving that loop somewhere in the dark, fooling myself into thinking I'd found a way out. But when the tow truck arrived an hour later, and when they refueled my truck and I started the engine and it turned over perfectly on the first try, and when I pulled back onto the interstate and continued east toward North Platte, I knew the truth. I was out, I was free, and I would never, ever forget what I'd left behind. Behind me, somewhere in the distance, invisible but present, I knew that stretch of road was still there, still looping, still holding all those faces in its windows, all those voices on the CB, all those trucks parked at rest areas that didn't exist on any map, waiting for the next driver who'd worn out their welcome on the regular roads, who'd become enough of a ghost that the road could pull them all the way in. I drove on into the dawn, and I never looked back. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm running a route I've run too many times before, I'll hear a voice on the CB that sounds almost familiar. Or I'll see an exit sign for a place that I know doesn't exist. And I'll remember that third option Maeve told me about, the one where you let go and see what happens. And I'll wonder if maybe I should have taken it. If maybe I'm still there, still driving that loop, still convinced I escaped, when really I'm just dreaming of freedom, while the road holds me tight and whispers that everything's going to be okay, that morning is coming, that I'm almost home. But I never let myself think about it for too long, because if I did, I might realize the truth, and I don't think I could handle that. The radio cut out somewhere around exit 47, leaving nothing but dead air and the low rumble of my engine. I didn't think much of it at first. Stations fade in and out all the time when you're driving through empty country, especially in weather like this. The snow had been coming down steady for the past 2 hours. Not heavy enough to be dangerous, but persistent enough to make the road ahead look like a tunnel of white with no end in sight. My name is Jonas Merrick, and I've been hauling freight for 12 years. I started when I was 26, right after my construction company went under during the recession, and never looked back. There's something peaceful about the road when it's just you and the highway and nobody expecting you to be anywhere except where you're headed. No boss breathing down your neck. No co-workers with their petty grievances. Just the simple clarity of point A to point B and getting paid for the miles in between. Tonight, I was running a load of industrial equipment from Bismarck down to Denver, farm machinery parts that some distributor needed before the spring planting season. The weight was good, right around 42,000 pounds, and the route was straightforward. Take Highway 85 south through Wyoming, pick up Interstate 25 at Cheyenne, and straight shot into Colorado. Easy money, or it should have been if the weather had cooperated. The first sign that something was off came around 9 p.m. when I saw the orange construction signs. Road closed ahead. Detour 2 miles. I frowned at that, checking the GPS on my phone. There hadn't been any construction warnings when I'd plotted the route that morning, and the highway looked fine. Fresh asphalt, clear lane markings, nothing that suggested recent work. But the signs were official-looking, the right shade of orange, the right reflective coating. So I slowed down and started watching for the detour route. The detour signs led me off Highway 85 onto what looked like a county road, 2 lanes running parallel to the main highway but separated by maybe half a mile of empty grassland. The road was in decent shape despite the snow, and I could see my route on the GPS showing I'd rejoin the highway in about 15 miles. Not ideal, but not terrible either. I'd lost maybe 20 minutes and I was still on schedule to make Denver by morning. That's when the radio stations started cutting out one by one. First the country station out of Gillette, then the news station, then the classic rock channel I'd been using to stay awake. I flipped through the dial, searching for anything, but every frequency just gave me static or silence. Even the CB radio was dead quiet, which was unusual. There's always someone talking on the CB, even in the middle of nowhere. Truckers getting lonely, dispatchers checking in, someone warning about speed traps or weather conditions. But tonight there was nothing. The snow picked up as I drove, the flakes getting larger and falling faster. My wipers struggled to keep the windshield clear, leaving smears of melted snow that refroze into patches of ice at the edges. I cranked the defroster higher and leaned forward in my seat, trying to see the road better. The county road had no streetlights, and my headlights only penetrated maybe 30 yards before the snow swallowed everything. It was like driving through a cloud, disorienting and claustrophobic in a way that made my chest feel tight. I'd been on the detour for about 20 minutes when I saw the lights ahead. A soft glow filtering through the storm, steady and warm. The unmistakable look of a gas station or truck stop. Relief washed over me. I could stop, use the bathroom, grab some coffee, maybe ask whoever was working about the road conditions and when the detour would end. The GPS showed nothing at this location, no businesses or towns marked on the map, but that wasn't unusual out here. Plenty of small, family-run stations that never bothered getting listed on mapping services. The station emerged from the snow like something out of another time. A single island with 2 pumps under a rusted metal canopy, a small building with the yellow light spilling from its windows, and a hand-painted sign that read Calder's Gas and Repair in faded letters. There were no other vehicles in the lot, no signs of recent activity in the snow, but the lights were on, and I could see movement inside the building. Someone was working the overnight shift. I pulled in slowly, my tires crunching over the accumulated snow, and parked near the pumps. The building looked old, maybe from the 70s or 80s based on the architecture, but well maintained. The paint was faded, but not peeling. The windows were clean, the door looked solid. I sat there for a moment with the engine running, studying the place, trying to figure out why it felt wrong. Nothing obvious, just a nagging sense that something was off about the whole setup. The door to the building opened and a woman stepped out, pulling a heavy coat around her shoulders. She was maybe in her 50s, gray hair pulled back in a ponytail, with the weathered face of someone who'd spent a lifetime in Wyoming winters. She waved at me, a simple gesture of acknowledgement, then headed back inside without waiting for a response. I took that as an invitation. I climbed down from the cab, immediately feeling the bite of the cold. The temperature had dropped into the single digits, and the wind had picked up, driving the snow sideways across the parking lot. I hunched my shoulders and jogged to the building, pushing through the door into blessed warmth. A bell chimed overhead, old-fashioned and tinny, announcing my arrival. The woman was behind the counter, pouring coffee into a styrofoam cup. She looked up as I entered, giving me a quick assessing glance the way people do out here, sizing up whether you're trouble or just another traveler passing through. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her because she nodded and pushed the coffee across the counter toward me. "Figured you could use this," she said. Her voice was rough, like she'd smoked for years or spent too much time breathing cold air. Not many people come through here, especially in weather like this. "Thanks," I said, accepting the coffee gratefully. It was hot enough to burn my tongue, but I didn't care. The warmth spreading through my chest was worth it. "I'm Jonas. Got detoured off 85 about 20 miles back. How much further until I can get back on the highway?" She frowned at that, the lines around her eyes deepening. "Detoured? There's no construction on 85, hasn't been for months." That's what the signs said. Orange markers, official looking. Sent me onto this county road. I pulled out my phone, showing her the GPS route. "See, I'm running parallel to the highway, should reconnect somewhere up ahead." She leaned over the counter, studying the screen with the careful attention of someone who didn't quite trust technology. After a moment, she straightened up, shaking her head. "That's Route 16, old stock route from back when they used to drive cattle through here. It runs parallel for about 30 miles, then it dead ends at a fence line. No connection to the highway, never has been." The coffee suddenly felt heavy in my stomach. That can't be right. The detour signs, I'm telling you what I know, she said, her tone gentle but firm. Been running this station for 30 years, Jonas. My husband and I bought it back in '94. Been here ever since. This road doesn't go anywhere except back where you came from or forward to nothing. If you want to get to the highway, you'll need to turn around, head back the way you came. I looked out the window at my truck, at the snow that was already covering my tire tracks, and felt the first real stirring of unease. Turning around meant losing an hour, maybe more in these conditions. It meant backtracking to find wherever I'd gone wrong, then starting over. And the way the weather was deteriorating, I wasn't sure I wanted to risk it. Is there anyone else working tonight? I asked. Maybe someone who knows another way through? Just me, she said. Ruth Calder. My husband passed 2 years ago, heart attack. Haven't been able to find anyone willing to work nights out here, so I do it myself. Not like we get much business anyway. She paused, studying my face. You look tired, Jonas. When's the last time you slept? I'm fine, I said automatically. I need to keep moving. I've got a delivery deadline in Denver. Denver's not going anywhere. But you might if you try driving in this storm without rest. She gestured to the coffee. Why don't you finish that, use the bathroom if you need to, and then we can figure out your best option. The storm's supposed to get worse before it gets better. Might be safer to wait it out here. The idea of stopping, of giving up forward progress, went against every instinct I had as a driver. But she had a point. I was tired, had been driving for 11 hours with only brief stops for fuel and food. And the storm was getting worse, the wind rattling the windows of the station, making the lights flicker slightly with each gust. Maybe an hour's rest wouldn't hurt. Maybe the weather would clear up and I could backtrack without losing too much time. All right, I said, an hour, but then I need to get moving. She smiled, the expression softening her weathered features. Fair enough. Bathroom's in the back, coffee's free, and there's some pre-packaged sandwiches in the cooler if you're hungry. They're not great, but they're edible. I used the bathroom, grabbed a sandwich that tasted like cardboard and mayonnaise, and settled into one of the plastic chairs near the window to eat. Ruth busied herself behind the counter, checking inventory or doing whatever it was gas station attendants did during the slow hours. The only sound was the wind outside and the occasional creak of the building settling. That's when I noticed the generator. It sat in the corner of the room, an industrial unit with a pull-start cord, and it wasn't running. But the lights were on, the cooler was humming, and the place clearly had power. I was about to ask Ruth about it when she spoke first. Don't mind the generator, she said without looking up from her paperwork. It's been acting strange lately. Turns on by itself sometimes, middle of the night. Scared me half to death the first few times it happened. Now I just ignore it. You had someone look at it. Had a mechanic out last month. He couldn't find anything wrong with it. Said maybe there was a short in the wiring, some kind of electrical interference. But it keeps happening. She finally looked up, and there was something in her expression I couldn't quite read. Worry, maybe, or unease. You ever feel like a place is trying to tell you something? Like it's got a message, but you can't quite make out what it's saying? I didn't know how to answer that, so I just shrugged and took another bite of my sandwich. But her words stuck with me, echoing in my head. A place trying to tell me something. What would a place need to say? And why would it choose to say it through a generator that turned itself on? The lights flickered again, and this time they went out completely for maybe 3 seconds before coming back on. Ruth cursed under her breath, looking at the ceiling like she could see through it to whatever was causing the problem. That's new, she muttered. The lights have been fine. It's always been just the generator. Maybe you should close up, I suggested. If the power's unstable, you could be at risk. And go where? I live in the apartment upstairs. This is home. Besides, the power'll hold. It always does. But she didn't sound convinced, and I noticed her hands were shaking slightly as she went back to her paperwork. I finished my sandwich and stood up, ready to tell her I was heading out, that I'd risk the backtrack rather than sit here in a place that felt increasingly wrong. But before I could speak, we both heard it, a sound from outside, cutting through the wind, a vehicle engine getting closer. Ruth moved to the window, peering out into the storm. I joined her, and we watched as headlights appeared on the road, coming from the direction I'd come from. The vehicle slowed as it approached the station, and I could make out the distinctive shape of a state patrol car. It pulled into the lot, parking near my truck, and the driver's door opened. A trooper climbed out, adjusting his hat against the wind, and headed for the station door. He was young, maybe late 20s, with the clean-cut look they all seemed to have. The bell chimed as he entered, bringing a swirl of snow with him. "Evening," he said, nodding to both of us. His name tag read Ellerman. "Either of you see any other vehicles come through here in the last hour?" "Just mine," I said. "I got detoured off Highway 85, been here maybe 20 minutes. Ellerman frowned. "There's no detour on 85. "Who told you there was?" "The signs," I said, feeling the unease grow stronger. "Orange construction signs, official looking, sent me onto this county road." "We didn't put up any signs," Ellerman said. "And this road, Route 16, it doesn't connect to anything. You're going to need to turn around, head back the way you came." He paused, looking between Ruth and me. "Actually, I'd recommend both of you clear out. We've got a severe weather warning in effect, and this area is going to be impassable within the hour. Miss Calder, you should close up and head home." "I am home," Ruth said quietly. Ellerman looked uncomfortable, like he wanted to argue but knew it wouldn't do any good. "All right, but you should know the highway's being closed at both ends. Nobody's getting in or out until this storm passes. You'll be on your own out here." That should have scared me more than it did. The idea of being stranded in an isolated gas station during a blizzard, cut off from the highway and any help, should have sent me running for my truck. But instead, I felt a strange calm, like some part of me had been expecting this, had known it was coming. Like this was exactly where I was supposed to be. "I'll wait it out here," I heard myself say. "No point trying to backtrack in these conditions. Better to sit tight until morning." Ellerman nodded slowly. "Your call, just be careful, both of you. And if anything happens, if you need help, you can try the radio, but I can't guarantee we'll be able to get to you." He handed Ruth a card with a phone number. "Emergency line. Use it if you have to." He left then, the bell chiming behind him, and we watched through the window as he climbed back into his patrol car. But instead of pulling out, he just sat there, engine running, lights on, but not moving, just sitting in the parking lot like he was waiting for something. "What's he doing?" Ruth asked. "I don't know," I said. But I had a feeling, a growing certainty that Trooper Ellerman wasn't going anywhere, that he'd sit out there all night if he had to, watching the station, watching us, making sure we didn't leave or that nothing got in. Guard dog or sentinel, I couldn't tell which. The generator in the corner suddenly roared to life, the pull cord retracting on its own, the engine catching and running smooth despite nobody touching it. Ruth jumped, her hand going to her chest, and I felt my heart rate spike. We both stared at the generator as it ran for maybe 15 seconds, then sputtered and died, leaving the room in the humming silence of the overhead lights. "It's trying to tell us something," Ruth whispered, and this time I couldn't disagree. Outside, through the window, I could see Trooper Ellerman's patrol car. The lights were still on, still pulsing that slow rhythmic pattern. But I couldn't see anyone inside. The driver's seat looked empty, the windshield dark despite the interior lights that should have been glowing. And even though I knew he'd just gotten in the car 2 minutes ago, even though I'd watched him climb inside and close the door, I couldn't shake the feeling that the patrol car had been empty for much longer than that. The wind died suddenly, and in the silence that followed I heard something else. A soft tapping sound, regular and persistent, coming from the roof of the building. Like fingers drumming on metal, or footsteps, or something trying to find a way in. Ruth heard it too. I could see it in the way she went rigid, the way her eyes tracked the sound as it moved across the ceiling. "What is that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," I said, but I was starting to have ideas and none of them were good. The tapping stopped. The wind started up again, and outside in the parking lot the empty patrol car continued its vigil, lights flashing into the storm, warning or beacon or trap, I couldn't tell which. I looked at my truck sitting in the snow, at the road stretching away into darkness, and I knew with absolute certainty that I wasn't leaving tonight. Something had brought me here, had led me off the highway with fake detour signs and false promises of a route that didn't exist. And whatever it was, it wanted me to stay. The question was why? The coffee had gone cold in my hand, but I kept holding it anyway, needing something to occupy my fingers. Ruth had moved away from the window, settling behind the counter like it was a fortress that could protect her from whatever was happening outside. We didn't talk. What was there to say? That we were both feeling it, that sense of wrongness that had infected the air like a virus? That we both knew something was very, very wrong with this night? I checked my phone for the 100th time. Still no signal, the screen showing that circle with a line through it that meant I was completely cut off. The GPS had stopped updating too, the map frozen on my last known location, showing me still on Highway 85 when I knew I was miles away on a road that supposedly went nowhere. I tried calling dispatch anyway, knowing it wouldn't work but needing to try. The phone didn't even attempt to connect, just gave me an error message and suggested I try again later. Later. Like there was going to be a later that was different from now. The generator started up again, that same sudden roar of an engine catching, and this time it stayed running. The sound filled the small building, loud and intrusive, drowning out the wind and my own thoughts. Ruth stood up from behind the counter, her face pale in the fluorescent lighting, and moved toward the generator like she was going to turn it off manually. But as she reached for the kill switch, the lights went out. Not gradually, not a flicker or a fade, but instant and complete darkness. The generator kept running, its engine noise the only sound in the void, and I felt panic spike through my chest. I couldn't see anything, couldn't orient myself in the sudden black, and for a moment I was completely disoriented. Then I remembered my phone, fumbled it out of my pocket, activated the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating Ruth standing frozen by the generator, her hand still reaching for the switch. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the light back at me like an animal caught in headlights. "Don't touch it," I said, though I couldn't have explained why. "Just leave it running." She pulled her hand back slowly, and we stood there in the darkness with the generator running and my phone's flashlight the only source of light. I swept the beam around the room, checking the corners, the windows, the door. Everything looked normal, or as normal as it could look in these circumstances. The cooler's light was out, its compressor silent. The cash register was dark. The only thing still working was the generator, and it hadn't been connected to anything when the lights went out. "The power line must have come down," Ruth said, her voice steady despite her pale face. "Storm probably knocked out a transformer or took down a pole. It happens out here sometimes. Then why is the generator running? It's not connected to anything." She didn't have an answer for that. We both knew it didn't make sense, that generators didn't start themselves and run for no reason. But there it was, chugging away in the corner, burning fuel, accomplishing nothing except making noise and creating heat. Like it was trying to maintain some kind of presence, to fill the silence with sound so we wouldn't hear what was happening outside. I moved to the window, pressing my face against the cold glass, trying to see out into the parking lot. The patrol car was still there, its lights still flashing, but the pattern had changed. Instead of that slow, rhythmic pulse, they were strobing fast, almost frantic, like an emergency signal or a warning. But the car itself still looked empty, and I couldn't see Trooper Ellerman anywhere. Maybe he went to check the power line, Ruth suggested, but she didn't sound like she believed it. In this weather, without telling us? I shook my head. He's out there somewhere, or he was, I don't know anymore. The tapping on the roof started again, but this time it was different. Louder, more insistent, and moving in a deliberate pattern. Not random impacts from the wind or falling ice, but something that sounded almost like footsteps. Heavy footsteps, crossing the roof from one side to the other, then back again. Pacing. Ruth's hand went to her mouth, and I saw her shoulders trembling. "There's nothing up there," she said, like she was trying to convince herself. "The roof is metal. It's slippery. Nothing could walk on it, especially not in this storm." But we could both hear it, could track the sound as it moved back and forth above us. Whatever was up there was big, and it was taking its time, like it was searching for something. Or waiting for something. The generator's engine changed pitch slightly, running rougher, and I wondered how much fuel it had, how long it could keep going before it ran out and left us in complete darkness and silence. "Do you have candles?" I asked Ruth. "Flashlights? Any kind of emergency lighting?" She nodded, moving behind the counter with practiced efficiency even in the dim light from my phone. She produced a large camping lantern and several smaller flashlights, setting them on the counter. "Battery-powered," she said. "Should last for hours if we need them." I helped her turn them on, arranging them around the room to create pools of light. It helped, having that illumination, being able to see the corners and doorways, but it also created shadows, deep pockets of darkness that seemed to move and shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. I told myself it was just the effect of multiple light sources, the way shadows naturally behaved. But I didn't quite believe it. My truck sat outside in the snow, and I thought about making a run for it. I could start the engine, turn on the heater, spend the night in the cab where I'd be mobile if I needed to leave. But something stopped me. The idea of opening that door, of stepping out into the storm with whatever was on the roof and whatever had happened to Trooper Ellerman, filled me with a dread so intense it made my hands shake. I was safer here, inside, with Ruth and the generator and the lights we'd managed to create. Or at least, that's what I told myself. "Tell me about this place," I said to Ruth, needing conversation, needing to hear a human voice that wasn't my own. "You said you've been here 30 years? She nodded, settling into one of the plastic chairs, her hands wrapped around a styrofoam cup of coffee she'd poured before the lights went out. 31 this spring. My husband Tom and I bought it from the previous owner, an old guy named Henderson who'd run it since the 50s. He was ready to retire, wanted to move somewhere warm, and we were looking for a change from city life. Seemed like a good fit. And it's been normal all that time?" She was quiet for a moment, her eyes distant. "Define normal. We've had quiet nights, sure, lots of them. Sometimes we'd go days without seeing another person, but there were always strange little things. Sounds we couldn't explain, equipment that would turn on by itself, Customers who'd stop in and then we'd never see them again, even though this is the only station for 40 miles in any direction. She paused, took a sip of cold coffee. Tom used to say the land remembered things, that places like this, isolated places where not much changes, they hold on to their history, keep it close like a secret. What kind of history? The usual. Native hunting grounds before settlers came through. Cattle drives in the 1800s. The old stock route that ran right where this road is now. There was a town here once, back in the 20s. Little place called Mercy, population maybe 200. Had a general store, a church, a few houses. Then the drought hit and everyone left. And now there's nothing except this station and some foundations you can barely see in the summer when the grass is tall. I thought about that. About a whole town disappearing, leaving nothing but foundations and memories. What happened to the people? Where did they go? Most of them moved on, found work in other places. But some of them stayed, or so the story goes. Refused to leave even when the water dried up and the crops failed. Tom found some old records at the county office once. Death certificates from 1934. 6 people died that winter, all in the same week. Hypothermia, starvation. One woman who just stopped eating according to the doctor's notes. She set down her coffee cup, her hands shaking slightly. They're buried out there somewhere, in ground too frozen to dig deep. Tom always said you could feel them on nights like this, watching, waiting. The wind hit the building hard, rattling the windows, and I heard something else underneath it. A low, moaning sound, like wind through a canyon or voices calling from a great distance. I tried to tell myself it was just the storm, just air moving past the building at odd angles, but it sounded too much like words, like someone trying to communicate through static. The generator coughed, sputtered, and died. The silence that followed was absolute, so complete it felt like a physical presence. I could hear my own heartbeat, could hear Ruth's breathing, could hear the creak and groan of the building settling. And underneath all of that, so faint I might have imagined it, I heard footsteps. Not on the roof this time. Outside, in the snow. Moving around the building in a slow circuit. "Do you hear that?" Ruth whispered. "Yeah," I said, though I wished I didn't. We sat there in the flickering light of the battery-powered lanterns, listening to those footsteps circle the building once, twice, 3 times. They never stopped, never paused, just kept that steady rhythm like someone on patrol, or like someone searching for a way in. I found myself counting the steps, trying to figure out how many there were, how big the person making them must be. But the numbers never quite added up. The pattern never quite resolved into something that made sense. My phone buzzed in my pocket, making me jump. I pulled it out, saw I had a text message, which shouldn't have been possible with no signal. The message was from a number I didn't recognize, just a string of digits that looked random. The content was a single sentence, "Don't go outside." I showed it to Ruth, my hand shaking. She read it, her face going even paler if that was possible. "Who sent that?" "I don't know. I don't have signal. This shouldn't even be possible." She looked at her own phone, an older model that she pulled from her pocket. Her screen showed the same lack of signal, but as we watched, a message appeared there too. Same unknown number, same message. "Don't go outside. This isn't real," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Someone's playing a prank. Some kids with radio equipment or..." The footsteps stopped. Just like that, mid-stride, they cut off and left nothing but the sound of wind and our own frightened breathing. I moved to the window again, looking out at the parking lot, and felt my stomach drop. The patrol car was gone. Not driven away, not buried in snow, just gone. The space where it had been parked was empty. showing undisturbed snow as if the car had never been there at all. "Ruth," I said quietly, "the patrol car's gone." She joined me at the window, and I heard her sharp intake of breath when she saw the empty lot. "That's not possible. We watched him park there. We saw him sitting in it." "I know," I said, "but it's gone now." We stood there together, staring out at the empty parking lot and my truck sitting alone in the snow, and I felt the reality of our situation settle over me like a heavy blanket. We were trapped here, cut off from the outside world, with no way to call for help and no understanding of what was happening. The road I'd taken didn't exist on any map. The patrol car that had been guarding us had vanished, and something was circling the building in the dark. And somewhere, out there in the storm, Trooper Ellerman was either lost or worse. The lights came back on. All at once, no warning, just sudden illumination that made us both cry out in surprise. The fluorescents buzzed overhead. The cooler hummed back to life. The cash register beeped as it rebooted. Everything was exactly as it had been before the power went out, except for one thing. The generator was still off. Stone cold, like it hadn't been running at all. I walked over to it, touched the engine casing, and felt no residual heat. It was freezing, the metal so cold it burned my fingers. But I'd heard it running, had listened to it chug away for 15 minutes before it died. There should have been some warmth left, some sign it had been operating. "This doesn't make sense," I said out loud, more to myself than to Ruth. "None of it makes sense," she replied. She was looking at the window again, at my truck sitting in the lot. "Jonas, look at your truck." I turned, following her gaze, and felt my blood turn to ice. My truck was in a different position, not by much, maybe 3 or 4 feet to the left of where I'd parked it, but definitely moved. And in the snow around it, I could see shapes, not tire tracks or footprints, but impressions, like something had been pressing against the sides of the trailer, testing it, looking for a way in. "I need to check my load," I said, moving toward the door before I could think better of it. "If something's tampered with it, if the seal is broken, I could lose the whole shipment." Ruth grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Did you not see the message? Don't go outside. Whatever's out there, whatever made those marks, it's still close. I have to check. That's 42,000 pounds of equipment, worth more than I make in a year. If it's damaged, if I can't deliver it, I'm liable." I pulled free of her grip, gently but firmly. "I'll be quick. 2 minutes to check the seal, then I'm back inside." "Jonas, please." But I was already opening the door, already stepping out into the cold that hit me like a fist. The wind had died down, leaving the air still and frozen, and the snow had stopped falling. The silence was unnatural, oppressive, like the world was holding its breath. I could see my breath frosting in front of me, could feel the cold working its way through my jacket in seconds. I jogged to my truck, my boots crunching in the snow, and moved along the passenger side toward the trailer. The impressions Ruth had seen were still visible. Dark shapes pressed into the snow against the trailer's side. They looked like handprints, dozens of them, but wrong, too large, too many fingers, arranged in patterns that hurt to look at. I forced my eyes away from them, focused on the trailer doors. The seal was intact. The little plastic tag with its unique number still hung from the lock, unbroken, exactly as it should be. Relief washed over me. Whatever had been testing the trailer, it hadn't gotten inside. The load was secure. I could still make my delivery, assuming I ever got out of here. That's when I felt it. A touch on my shoulder, light and cold, like someone had pressed their hand against my jacket. I spun around, heart hammering, but there was nothing there. Just empty parking lot and falling snow that I was certain had stopped a moment ago, but was now coming down thick and heavy again. Another touch, this time on the back of my neck. I whirled again, and this time I saw something. A shape in the snow, barely visible, like a distortion in the air. Human-sized, but not human-shaped, moving closer with each second. I backed away, bumping into the trailer, and heard a sound that made my skin crawl. Breathing. Slow and deliberate, right next to my ear, but still nothing visible. I ran, didn't think, didn't plan, just bolted for the station door 20 yards away. Behind me, I heard footsteps in the snow matching my pace, staying close. I could feel its presence, could sense it reaching for me. And I knew if it touched me again, if it made solid contact, something very bad would happen. Ruth had the door open, was screaming at me to hurry, and I dove through the opening just as something brushed against my back. The door slammed shut behind me, Ruth throwing her weight against it, and we heard a thump as whatever had been chasing me hit the other side. Then silence. I lay on the floor, gasping, my heart racing so fast I thought it might burst. Ruth was shaking, her back still pressed against the door, her eyes wide with terror. "What was that?" she asked. "What did you see?" "I don't know," I managed between breaths. "Something. Almost nothing. It was barely there, like it was trying to become visible but couldn't quite manage it." "Did it touch you?" I thought about that light pressure on my shoulder, on my neck. The way it had felt cold but also electric, like a static shock that went on too long. "Twice," I said. "But it didn't get a solid grip. I got away before it could." She looked at my jacket, at my neck, and I saw her face go even paler. "Jonas, your coat." I looked down and saw what she was seeing. Where the thing had touched me, the fabric of my jacket had changed. It was covered in frost, ice crystals spreading out from two distinct handprint shapes, growing even as I watched. The frost was getting thicker, harder, spreading down my sleeve and across my back. I ripped the jacket off, threw it across the room, and watched as the frost continued to grow, covering the entire garment in a matter of seconds until it was rigid and frozen solid. "What the hell is happening?" I asked, though I didn't expect an answer. Ruth was looking at the window, at something outside, and when she spoke, her voice was flat and distant. "They're here," she said. "All of them. Everyone who stayed when Mercy died. They've been out there all along, waiting, and now they want in." I moved to the window to see what she was seeing, and immediately wished I hadn't. The parking lot wasn't empty anymore. It was full of shapes, dozens of them, barely visible in the falling snow. Human-shaped, but wrong, moving with an unnatural stillness, all facing the station, all watching us. And in the middle of them all, standing next to my truck, I saw Trooper Ellerman, or what used to be Trooper Ellerman. He was covered in that same frost I'd seen on my jacket, ice growing on his uniform. His face frozen in an expression of shock and horror. He was looking right at me, and his mouth was moving, forming words I couldn't hear through the glass. Ruth grabbed my arm, pulled me away from the window. "Don't look at them, don't make eye contact. Tom told me that once, back when he was still alive. On nights when he felt them watching, he'd close all the curtains and refuse to look outside. Said if you looked at them too long, they'd know you could see them and then they'd never leave you alone." "I think it's a little late for that," I said, but I let her pull me away from the window anyway. The building shook. Not from wind, but from impact, like something large had thrown itself against the wall. Then another impact, and another coming from different directions. The shapes outside were testing the structure, looking for weak points, trying to find a way in. And judging by the way the walls were creaking, by the way the windows were rattling in their frames, they were going to succeed. "The generator," Ruth said suddenly. "When it runs, they can't get in. I don't know why, but Whenever it starts on its own, that's when they're closest, like it's keeping them out somehow. Then start it, I said, moving toward the machine. Get it running now before they break through. She joined me, and together we grabbed the pull cord. It wouldn't budge. We tried again, putting our whole weight into it, but the cord was frozen solid, locked in place like it had been welded there. The generator sat silent and useless, and the impacts on the walls were getting stronger, more frequent. Something was going to give way soon, and then we'd be completely exposed. My phone buzzed again. Another message, same unknown number. The basement. Go down. Do you have a basement? I asked Ruth. She nodded slowly. Under the counter. Trapdoor leads down to a root cellar Tom built when we first bought the place, but it's tiny, barely 6 feet square. We haven't used it in years. Show me. We ran to the counter, and Ruth pulled away a worn rug to reveal a wooden trapdoor with an iron ring. I grabbed the ring and pulled, and the door came up easily, revealing a wooden ladder descending into darkness. The smell that came up was old and musty, earth and cold and something else I couldn't identify. But it was shelter, and right now that was all that mattered. Go, I said to Ruth. I'll follow you down. She hesitated, looking at the trapdoor like it was a grave she was being asked to climb into. But another impact hit the wall, this one hard enough to crack one of the windows, and that decided her. She climbed down the ladder, and I followed, pulling the trapdoor closed above us just as I heard the front door of the station splinter and break. We huddled in the darkness of the root cellar, listening to the sounds above us. Footsteps, dozens of them, moving through the station. The crash of shelving being knocked over, the shatter of glass, the metallic screech of the cooler door being torn from its hinges. They were destroying everything, searching, hunting for us. And then, right above our hiding spot, the footsteps stopped. I held my breath, felt Ruth do the same beside me. We waited in perfect silence, knowing that whoever or whatever was up there could hear us if we made even the slightest sound. The trapdoor creaked, just a little, like someone was testing its weight, seeing if it would hold. Ruth's hand found mine in the darkness, gripped it tight enough to hurt. The trapdoor creaked again, and I saw a thin line of light appear around its edges as it began to lift. Then the generator started. I heard it clearly, even from down here, that sudden roar of an engine catching, and the footsteps above us scattered, retreating, fleeing the sound. The trapdoor settled back into place, and the sounds of destruction stopped. We waited in the dark, holding hands, listening to the generator run somewhere above us. And for the first time in hours, I felt something that might have been hope. Maybe we'd survive this night after all. We stayed in the basement for what felt like hours but was probably closer to 30 minutes. The generator kept running, its steady engine noise filtering down through the floorboards above us, and gradually the sounds of movement in the station ceased. Either the things outside had left, or they were waiting, patient and silent, for the generator to stop running again. Ruth still held my hand, and I could feel her trembling. My flashlight app was still on, providing just enough light to see the cramped space we'd taken refuge in. The root cellar was exactly as she'd described, 6 feet square, maybe 7 feet deep, with earthen walls and a dirt floor. Wooden shelves lined 2 walls, holding dusty mason jars filled with what looked like preserved vegetables from years ago. Some of the jars had broken, their contents rotted into dark sludge that gave off a faint smell of decay. "My husband built this," Ruth said quietly, breaking the silence. "Said every station needed a safe place, somewhere to hide if things went bad. I always thought he meant robbers or criminals, people passing through with bad intentions. Never imagined." She trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish the thought. "How long have they been out there?" I asked. "The things from Mercy. How long have you known about them?" She was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke her voice was distant, like she was remembering something she'd tried very hard to forget. "The first time I saw them was about 6 months after we bought the station. Late winter night, a lot like tonight. Tom and I were both working, and the generator started up on its own like it's been doing lately. We went to check it, and when we looked outside, we saw them. Just shapes in the snow at first, barely visible. But as we watched, they got clearer, more defined. We could see their faces, or what used to be faces." She shuddered, and I felt the tremor run through her hand into mine. Tom recognized one of them. An old-timer he'd talked to when we first arrived, local historian who'd told him all about Mercy and what happened there. Guy had died 2 years before we showed up, but there he was, standing in our parking lot looking up at the windows. After that night, we made a rule. When the generator starts on its own, we don't look outside. We just wait for it to stop, and then we go about our business like nothing happened. "But it got worse," I said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah, over the years they started appearing more frequently. The generator would run almost every night by the end, and they'd get closer to the building, pressing against the walls, testing the windows. Tom said they were getting stronger, that something about this place was feeding them, giving them more presence. He wanted to leave, to sell the station and move on. But who'd buy it? Who'd want a place that's haunted by people who died 90 years ago?" A sound from above made us both freeze. Footsteps again, but different this time. Heavier, more deliberate. Human footsteps. Someone walking across the floor with purpose, heading toward the counter where the trapdoor was hidden. Ruth's grip on my hand tightened to the point of pain. "Ruth," a male voice called out. "Ruth, are you down there? It's me. It's Troy Ellerman. The station's clear now. It's safe to come up." We didn't move, didn't respond. Because I'd seen Trooper Ellerman outside, covered in frost, his face frozen in that horrible expression. Whatever was calling to us now might sound like him, might even believe it was him, but it wasn't. It was something else wearing his voice like a disguise. "I know you're down there," the voice continued. "I can hear you breathing. You need to come up now, Ruth. The basement isn't safe. The walls are starting to collapse. You'll be buried if you stay down there." I looked at the earthen walls surrounding us. They looked solid, stable, exactly as old as they should be without any signs of imminent collapse. It was lying, trying to scare us into revealing ourselves. "Please," the voice said, and now it had taken on a pleading quality that might have been convincing if I hadn't known better. "I'm hurt. I need help. Don't leave me up here alone with them." Ruth pulled her hand free from mine and covered her mouth like she was trying to hold back a sob or a scream. I understood the impulse. There was something deeply wrong about hearing a familiar voice twisted into something alien, something that wanted to trick us into exposing ourselves to whatever fate had befallen the real Trooper Ellerman. The footsteps moved away from the trapdoor, crossing the floor toward the door. We heard it open, heard the wind rush in, and then silence. Either the thing had left, or it was trying to make us think it had left. I wasn't sure which was worse. "We can't stay down here forever," I whispered to Ruth. "Eventually, the generator will run out of fuel, and then what? We're trapped down here with no escape route and no way to defend ourselves." "I know," she whispered back, "but I don't know what else to do. Every time we go up there, every time we try to leave or call for help, something stops us. It's like we're caught in a trap that we can't even see, and the more we struggle, the tighter it gets." My phone buzzed, making us both jump in the confined space. I pulled it out, saw another message from that unknown number. "The generator will run for 16 more minutes. When it stops, they will come for you. There is a way out, but you must move now." I showed the message to Ruth. She read it, her expression cycling through confusion, fear, and finally something that might have been desperate hope. "Who's sending these?" she asked. "Who even knows we're down here?" "I don't know, but they've been right so far. Don't go outside, go to the basement." Both of those messages kept us alive. Maybe we should listen to this one too. What way out? There's only one exit from this cellar, and it leads right back into the station where those things are waiting. I pointed my flashlight around the cellar, examining the walls more carefully. The earthen sides were packed hard from decades of compression, but in one corner, behind a set of old wooden shelves, I thought I saw something. A darker patch, like the earth was disturbed there. I moved closer, pushing the shelves aside with a screech of wood on wood that made us both wince. Behind the shelves was a wooden door, old and weathered, set into the earthen wall. It looked like it had been there for a very long time, maybe since before the station was built. Certainly before Ruth and her husband had bought the place. I tried the handle, felt it turn, and pushed. The door opened inward, revealing a tunnel that extended beyond the reach of my flashlight. "Did you know this was here?" I asked Ruth. She shook her head, her eyes wide. "Tom never mentioned it. He built this cellar himself, or I thought he did. But that tunnel, it looks older, much older." We stood there looking at the dark opening, knowing we had maybe 15 minutes before the generator stopped, and whatever protection it offered disappeared. Behind us, above us, the things from Mercy waited. Ahead of us, in the tunnel, who knew what waited? Neither option was good, but at least the tunnel offered the possibility of escape. "We have to try," I said. Ruth nodded slowly. "You go first. I'll follow." I climbed into the tunnel, having to crouch immediately as the ceiling was low, barely 4 feet high. The walls were earthen, but reinforced with old timber beams that looked like they might have been part of the original town. The air smelled of damp earth and something else, something organic and old. I moved forward carefully, testing each step, with Ruth close behind me. The tunnel extended for maybe 30 yards, sloping gradually upward, before opening into a larger chamber. I straightened up, sweeping my flashlight around, and felt my breath catch. We were in what looked like an old cellar, much larger than the one we'd left. Stone walls, a ceiling of wooden beams, and in one corner, a staircase leading up to a wooden door. "This is under one of the old buildings," Ruth said, her voice echoing slightly in the space. "One of the houses from Mercy. We're under the town." "Can we get out?" I asked, moving toward the staircase. "I don't know. The buildings are all gone, collapsed years ago, but maybe." She followed me up the stairs, and together we pushed on the door at the top. It resisted at first, then gave way with a groan, opening upward and out. We climbed out into the storm, into the ruins of Mercy. The snow had stopped again, leaving the air clear and bitterly cold, and in the moonlight that had broken through the clouds I could see the remains of the town. Foundations of houses, the skeletal frame of what might have been a church, the outline of streets buried under decades of dirt and snow. It was all here, all of it, just invisible from the road, hidden, and standing among the ruins arranged in precise rows like they were attending some kind of ceremony, were the shapes. Dozens of them, maybe more, all frozen in place, all facing the same direction, all facing us. Ruth grabbed my arm, pulling me back toward the cellar door, but I was transfixed, because in the moonlight I could see them clearly now, could see what they really were, not ghosts or spirits or hallucinations. They were people, or they had been people, once. Now they were something else. Something caught between states, their bodies preserved in ice and snow, their faces locked in expressions of hunger and cold and desperate need. and they were all so incredibly sad. "We need to go back," Ruth was saying, her voice rising with panic. "We need to get back to the station before the generator stops. Jonas, please, we need to go now." But I couldn't move, because I'd recognized one of the faces, my own. Standing in the second row, fourth from the left, was a version of me. Same jacket I'd been wearing, same face, same everything. Except this version was frozen, covered in frost, eyes empty of everything except that terrible sadness. "That's not possible," I whispered. "That's not me. I'm right here. I'm alive." "You're seeing things," Ruth said, pulling harder on my arm. "The cold, the stress, it's making you see things that aren't real. Please, Jonas, we have to go." I let her pull me back toward the cellar door, but I couldn't take my eyes off that frozen figure. It looked exactly like me. Exactly. Down to the scar on my left hand from a motorcycle accident when I was 19, down to the way my hair curled slightly at the temple. It was me. Or it would be me. Or it had been me in some version of events that had already happened, or was about to happen, or was happening right now in some parallel track of time I didn't understand. We climbed back down into the cellar and ran through the tunnel, not caring anymore about being quiet or careful. The generator was still running when we reached the root cellar, but the sound was different now. Rougher, sputtering, like it was running on fumes. We had maybe a minute, maybe less, before it died. Ruth climbed the ladder first, pushing the trapdoor open and pulling herself up into the station. I followed, emerging into a scene of destruction. The shelves were knocked over, merchandise scattered everywhere, windows cracked or broken. But the station was empty of the shapes. Whatever the generator was doing, it was keeping them at bay. I ran to the front windows and looked out at the parking lot. My truck was still there, still in that position it had been moved to, and arranged around it, in perfect rows just like they'd been in the ruins of Mercy, were the shapes. All of them. Waiting. The generator coughed, sputtered, and died. The sudden silence was deafening, and in that silence I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. Footsteps. Not on the roof this time, not outside. Inside the station, coming from the back room, moving toward us with slow deliberation. "Get to your truck," Ruth said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Start it, leave, don't look back. What about you? This is my place, has been for 30 years. I'm not leaving it, not for them, not for anything." She moved behind the counter, reaching under it, pulling out an old shotgun. "Go, before they get here. I can't just leave you." "Yes, you can, and you will. Whatever's happening here, whatever they want, it's got nothing to do with you. You're just passing through. So pass through and don't come back." The footsteps were getting closer. Multiple sets now, coming from different directions. They'd been in the building the whole time, I realized. Waiting in the back room, in the bathroom, in the storage closet. Waiting for the generator to stop so they could emerge. I ran for the door, threw it open, and sprinted for my truck. The shapes in the parking lot didn't move, didn't react, just stood there watching as I fumbled with the door handle and climbed into the cab. My hands shook as I turned the key, praying the engine would start, praying I hadn't been down in that cellar long enough for the cold to kill the battery. The engine turned over, caught, roared to life. I'd never been so grateful for the sound of a diesel engine in my entire life. I threw it in gear, ready to back out and get the hell away from this place, when I looked at the station one more time. Ruth was standing in the doorway, the shotgun in her hands, facing into the interior of the station. She looked small and alone and defiant, and I knew I couldn't leave her there. Couldn't drive away and leave her to whatever fate awaited her. I was reaching for the door handle, ready to run back and drag her to the truck by force if necessary, when she turned and looked at me. Even from this distance, even in the poor light, I could see her expression. She was smiling, sad, resigned, but smiling, and she mouthed 2 words, "Go now." Then she raised the shotgun and fired into the darkness behind her. The shapes in the parking lot surged forward, moving as one, flowing toward the station like water finding the path of least resistance. I had maybe 5 seconds before they cut off my escape route. I backed out, tires spinning in the snow, and got the truck pointed toward the road. The last thing I saw as I pulled away was Ruth, still standing in that doorway, still firing, holding them back for just a few more precious seconds, buying me time to escape. I drove, fast as I dared on the snow-covered road, fighting the truck's tendency to fishtail, keeping my eyes on the white lines when I could see them. Behind me, in the rearview mirror, I saw the station's lights go out one by one. And then there was only darkness, and I was alone on a road that shouldn't exist, heading toward a highway I wasn't sure I'd ever find. I drove for an hour straight, maybe more, not slowing down, not stopping, just putting distance between myself and that station. The county road stretched on endlessly, exactly as Ruth had said it would, running parallel to Highway 85 but never reconnecting. No intersections, no side roads, no signs of civilization. Just empty white expanse on both sides and the road ahead disappearing into darkness. The fuel gauge dropped steadily. I was down to a quarter tank when I finally saw something ahead. Not the highway, not a town, but another set of lights. Orange construction barriers, the same kind I'd seen hours ago when this nightmare started. And beyond them, I could see the familiar sight of Highway 85, the real highway, with its proper lane markings and shoulder reflectors and everything that marked it as part of the normal world. I slowed down, approaching the barriers cautiously. They were arranged across the road in a line, blocking the way forward, with a gap on the right side just wide enough for a vehicle to slip through. Like someone had deliberately left an opening for me. I guided the truck through it, felt the tires transition from the rough county road to the smooth asphalt of the highway, and almost wept with relief. I was back on the map, back in reality, back in a world that made sense. I pulled over onto the shoulder and sat there for a moment, engine idling, trying to process what had just happened, trying to convince myself it had been real and not some hallucination brought on by exhaustion and stress. My jacket was still back at the station, the one that had frozen solid when that thing touched me. I had no physical evidence of what I'd been through except my own memories and the time I'd lost. According to my phone, which now showed full signal and a reconnection to the cell network, it was 4:30 in the morning. I'd been on that detour for almost 7 hours. I tried calling Ruth's station. The number was on a faded business card I'd picked up when I first stopped there, tucked into my pocket and forgotten until now. The phone rang and rang, then went to an automated message. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Please check the number and try again. Not disconnected. Not out of service temporarily. No longer in service, like it had never existed at all. I pulled up GPS, tried to search for Calder's Gas and Repair. No results. Tried gas stations on Route 16, Wyoming. The map showed Route 16 as a thin gray line, marked as unmaintained, with no services or buildings indicated along its entire length. According to the database, there was nothing there. Had never been anything there. But I'd been there. I'd talked to Ruth, had drunk her coffee, had hidden in her basement and climbed through that tunnel and seen those terrible frozen shapes in the ruins of Mercy. It had been real. All of it, hadn't it? My phone rang, making me jump so hard I hit my head on the ceiling of the cab. The caller ID showed unknown number, the same designation as all those text messages I'd received. I answered it, brought the phone to my ear, and waited. Static greeted me, thick and heavy, the kind that makes you wonder if the line is even connected. Then, through the interference, I heard a voice. Ruth's voice, distant and distorted but unmistakably hers. "Jonas," she said, "can you hear me? Ruth, where are you? What happened after I left? I'm where I've always been, where I'll always be. The station's not just a place, Jonas, it's a moment. A piece of time that got stuck, that couldn't move forward or backward, and I'm stuck with it. That doesn't make sense. You can leave, you can just close up and walk away. No, I can't. Tom tried once, did I tell you that? After the first few years of strange happenings, he decided he'd had enough. Packed a bag, got in his car, drove away. Made it about 5 miles before the road just looped back. He'd think he was heading south toward Cheyenne, but somehow he'd end up back here. Tried it 6 times in 1 week before he gave up. The station wouldn't let him leave. And then he died, and I realized I couldn't leave either. Not physically, maybe not ever. "I'm coming back," I said, already reaching for the gear shift. "I'm going to get you out of there. Find some way to break whatever's holding you. Don't, please, Jonas, you made it out. You're free. That's more than most people who find this place can say. Don't throw that away trying to save someone who's already gone. You're not gone. You're right there on the phone. You're talking to me. I'm an echo," she said softly. "A recording that plays when someone needs to hear it." The real Ruth Calder died 2 years ago. Same heart attack that killed my husband. They found us in the station, both of us behind the counter. Both of us frozen solid even though it was July and the heater was running. The police report said carbon monoxide poisoning. Said the generator had been running in the building and the fumes built up, but that's not what really happened. I felt cold spreading through my chest. The same cold I'd felt when that thing touched me in the parking lot. Then what did happen? We stayed too long, gave too much of ourselves to this place, and eventually it claimed us completely. Now we're part of it. Tom and me and everyone else from Mercy who refused to leave when they should have. We're all still here, Jonas, waiting for travelers who take wrong turns, who follow detour signs that shouldn't exist, who stop at stations that aren't on any map. "Why?" I asked. "What's the point? Why trap people? Why any of this?" "Lonely places get hungry," Ruth said. "Empty places need to be filled. Route 16 used to be something, used to have a purpose. Now it's just a ghost road, and ghost roads need ghost travelers to keep existing. You were supposed to stay, Jonas, supposed to join us, but you got away, and that's—" She paused, and I thought I heard something like pride in her voice. "That's good. That's how it should be." "The message that told me about the tunnel," I said. "That was you?" "Me and others. The ones who still remember what it's like to be human, who still want people to escape even if we can't. We're not all monsters here, Jonas. Some of us are just trapped, and we do what we can to help." The static was getting worse, her voice breaking up into fragments. "Ruth, are you still there?" "Have to go." Her words barely audible now. "They're coming. The sun's almost up and they don't like the light. Ruth, drive safe, Jonas. Watch the weather. And if you ever see another detour sign on Highway 85... The static surged, drowning out her words completely. Then the line went dead, and I was alone again in my cab with the engine running and the dawn beginning to break on the eastern horizon. I sat there for a long time, watching the sky lighten, trying to decide if I believed what I'd just heard. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as impossible, as stress-induced hallucination or elaborate prank. But another part of me, the part that had seen those frozen shapes in the ruins and felt that cold touch in the parking lot, knew it was true. All of it. Ruth Calder was dead. had been dead for 2 years, and I'd spent an evening talking to her ghost, drinking coffee she'd poured from memory, hiding in a basement that might not exist anymore. The whole experience had been a message from something that existed in the spaces between normal reality, reaching out to catch travelers who strayed from the path. I should have been terrified, should have been racing to the nearest town to report what happened, to warn people about the phantom detour and the deadly station. But instead I felt a strange sense of peace. I'd been given a gift in a way, a glimpse into something most people never see, a brush with the inexplicable that I'd survived. And Ruth and the others who sent those messages, they'd helped me survive. They'd chosen to let me go rather than add me to their collection. That meant something. I wasn't sure what, but something. I put the truck in gear and started driving east, toward the sunrise, toward Denver and my delivery deadline. The highway was empty, the storm having kept most travelers off the road, and I made good time. By the time I reached Cheyenne 2 hours later, I'd almost convinced myself the whole thing had been a dream. Almost. But when I stopped to fuel up at a truck plaza on the outskirts of the city, when I went inside to pay and grab some coffee, I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. On the wall behind the counter, among the usual collection of old photographs and memorabilia that every truck stop seems to have, was a picture in a dusty frame. The photo showed a gas station from decades ago, with a couple standing in front of it smiling at the camera. The woman was younger in the photo, her hair darker, but I recognized her immediately. Ruth Calder. And the man next to her, arm around her shoulders, must have been Tom. They looked happy, optimistic, like people starting a new adventure together, like people who had no idea what the next 30 years would bring. Under the photo was a small brass plaque. Calder's Gas and Repair, Route 16, 1994, 2023. In memory of Ruth and Tom Calder, who served travelers for 29 years. I stood there staring at that photo for a long time, until the clerk asked if I was all right. I paid for my fuel and coffee, made some excuse about being tired, and went back to my truck. But I couldn't stop looking at that photograph in my mind. The way Ruth had smiled, the way Tom had his arm around her like he was protecting her from something. Had they known, even back then? Had they felt the strangeness of that place from the beginning, or had it crept up on them slowly over the years? As I climbed back into my cab, I noticed an older driver at the next pump, a man in his 60s with a weathered face and the cautious eyes of someone who'd spent too many years on dangerous roads. He was watching me, and when our eyes met, he nodded slightly and walked over. "You all right, son?" he asked. "You look like you've seen something you weren't meant to see." I almost brushed him off, almost told him I was fine, and drove away. But something in his expression, some understanding or recognition, made me hesitate. "You ever drive Route 16?" I asked. The old, stock route that runs parallel to 85. His expression changed instantly. The casual concern vanished, replaced by something harder and more wary. "Once," he said quietly. 20 years ago. Never again." He looked around the parking lot like he was checking to make sure no one else was listening. "You stopped at the station, didn't you? Calder's place. How did you know?" "Because I did the same thing, different storm, different year, but the same detour signs, the same phantom exit. I spent 4 hours in that station with Ruth and Tom, and when I finally got back to the highway, I looked them up." He paused, his jaw working like he was chewing on something bitter. "They'd been dead for 3 years when I met them. Carbon monoxide," the report said. "But you and I both know that's not what killed them." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the winter morning. "What do you think it was?" "The road," he said simply. "That whole stretch is cursed, has been since Mercy died. The people who refused to leave, who stayed until the cold and hunger took them, they're still there in some form. And they pull in travelers, try to make them stay too. I think Ruth and Tom fought it for years, tried to help people escape like they helped you and me, but eventually the place claimed them anyway. Did you... I hesitated, not sure how to ask. Did you see yourself there? Among the frozen shapes? His eyes widened slightly, and I knew I'd struck a nerve. In the ruins, yeah. I saw a version of me standing there with the others. Tom told me it was a warning, showed what would happen if I stayed too long. I got out that night and never went back. He looked at my truck, at the load I was carrying. You're headed to Denver? Yeah, delivery by noon. Then you better get moving. And when you're done, when you're heading back north, take a different route. Take 25 through Colorado, or go west to Utah and come up through Idaho. Don't go near 85 in Wyoming, don't even think about it. I wasn't planning to. Good, because here's what they don't tell you about that place. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. It marks you. Once you've been there, once you've seen it and escaped, it knows you. And sometimes, on certain nights when the weather's bad and you're driving alone, you might see those orange detour signs again. Different road, different state, but the same signs, and if you follow them... He trailed off, shaking his head. Just don't. No matter how much you want to know what happened to Ruth, no matter how curious you get, don't ever go back. He walked away then, climbed into his own truck and pulled out of the parking lot without another word. I stood there watching him go, feeling the weight of his warning settle over me like a heavy coat. He'd lived with this knowledge for 20 years, had spent 2 decades avoiding certain roads, watching for signs that might lead him back to that place. And now I was going to do the same. The drive to Denver felt surreal. Everything looked normal. The highway, the other vehicles, the gradual transition from Wyoming's high plains to Colorado's Front Range. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was seeing it all through a film, like reality had become slightly transparent and I could see the shapes moving underneath it. Every exit sign made me flinch. Every construction warning made my hands tighten on the wheel. I kept expecting to see those orange barriers again, kept expecting the road to loop back on itself and deposit me right back at Calder's station. But it didn't. The highway stayed normal. The miles accumulated normally, and by 10 a.m. I was backing into the loading dock at the distribution center in Denver. The workers who unloaded my trailer didn't notice anything wrong with me, didn't see the exhaustion in my eyes or the tremor in my hands. They just wanted the equipment, wanted to check it off their inventory list and get on with their day. I watched them unload piece by piece and found myself thinking about those handprints in the snow around my trailer, the shapes that had been testing it, looking for a way in. Had they been trying to contaminate my load somehow? Or had they just been curious, drawn to the warmth and motion of a living person's truck? I'd never know. The paperwork took an hour. Signatures, bills of lading, confirmation of delivery times and condition of cargo. All the bureaucratic necessities that turned freight hauling from an adventure into a job. By the time I was done, it was almost noon, and I was so tired I could barely keep my eyes open. I should have found a hotel, should have slept for 12 hours and started fresh the next day. But the idea of staying in Denver, of being stationary and vulnerable while whatever had marked me decided what to do about it, was unbearable. I fueled up, grabbed a thermos of coffee and a sandwich I wouldn't eat, and headed back out onto the interstate. But not north. Not toward Wyoming. Instead, I went west on I-70, toward the mountains, planning to loop through Utah and come back to Bismarck from the other direction. It would add 2 days to my trip, would cost me in fuel and time, but I didn't care. The old driver's warning echoed in my head. Take a different road. The mountains were beautiful in the winter sunlight, snow-covered peaks gleaming against a sky so blue it hurt to look at. I drove through tunnels blasted through solid rock, crossed valleys so deep and vast they seemed to swallow the highway whole, past ski resorts and mining towns and all the ordinary wonders of the American West. And slowly, mile by mile, the tension in my chest began to ease. Maybe it was over. Maybe I really had escaped. Maybe Route 16 and Calder's Station and all those frozen shapes in Mercy were behind me for good, relegated to memory and nightmare. I wanted to believe that. Needed to believe it. I made it to Grand Junction by evening, pulled into a truck stop, and finally allowed myself to stop. The parking lot was full of other trucks. The restaurant was crowded with drivers eating dinner and swapping stories, and everything felt blessedly, wonderfully normal. I ate a meal that actually tasted like food, took a shower that actually made me feel clean, and climbed into my sleeper berth with the intention of sleeping for at least 8 hours. But sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ruth standing in that doorway with her shotgun. Saw Trooper Ellerman covered in frost, his mouth forming words I couldn't hear. Saw myself standing in the ruins of Mercy, frozen and sad and forever waiting. The images cycled through my mind like a slideshow, and when I finally did drift off around midnight, my dreams were worse. I dreamed I was back on Route 16, driving through the storm, approaching Calder's Station. But this time, when I pulled into the parking lot, Ruth wasn't there. The building was dark, abandoned, windows broken and door hanging open. I went inside anyway, driven by some compulsion I couldn't resist, and found the station full of ice. Not just frost or cold, but actual ice, coating every surface, hanging from the ceiling in massive stalactites, covering the floor in a slick sheet that reflected my flashlight beam back at me in fractured patterns, and in the ice I could see shapes, preserved like insects in amber, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all the travelers who'd stopped here over the years, all the ones who hadn't escaped. They were arranged throughout the station like decorations, their faces visible through the translucent ice, their eyes open and aware and screaming silently. I tried to run, but my feet wouldn't move. Looked down and saw that ice was growing up my legs, spreading with impossible speed, and I realized I was joining them, becoming another decoration in this frozen museum of the lost. I woke up gasping, tangled in my blanket, my heart racing so fast I thought I might be having a heart attack. The sleeper berth was dark and warm and safe, but I couldn't shake the feeling of that ice creeping up my legs. I turned on the light, checked my legs to make sure they were fine, and sat there for a long time trying to calm down. Just a dream. Just stress and trauma manifesting in my subconscious. It didn't mean anything. But when I finally climbed out of the sleeper and got ready to start driving again, when I looked in the small mirror mounted on the wall, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, on my neck, right where that thing had touched me in the parking lot, was a mark. Not a bruise or a scratch, but something else. A pattern of frost, delicate and intricate, like someone had drawn on my skin with ice crystals. It was small, no bigger than a silver dollar, but it was there. Proof that what had happened on Route 16 was real. I touched it with trembling fingers, felt normal skin temperature, normal texture. But the pattern remained visible, a permanent reminder of my brush with whatever existed in that strange space between roads. I pulled my collar up, hiding it from view, and told myself it would fade. That it was just temporary, just a reaction to cold or stress or something. But deep down, I knew better. The old driver had said the place marked you. And here was my mark, worn on my skin like a brand, announcing to anything that cared to look that I'd been touched by the ghosts of Route 16. I drove west through Utah, trying to put as much distance as possible between myself and Wyoming. The mark on my neck didn't fade. If anything, it seemed to get more defined over the next few days, the pattern becoming clearer, more intricate. I kept it covered with high collars and bandanas, told anyone who asked that I'd gotten a rash from new laundry detergent. Nobody questioned it. Why would they? But I questioned it. Questioned what it meant, what it was doing to me, whether it was slowly spreading or changing, or preparing me for something I didn't want to think about. At night, alone in my sleeper berth in different truck stops across Utah and Idaho, I'd examine it in the mirror, trying to understand the pattern. It looked almost like a map, I realized. Lines and curves and intersections that might have been roads if you looked at them right. And one night, 3 days after leaving Denver, I got curious enough to trace the pattern onto a piece of paper. Then I compared it to a map of Wyoming. My hands started shaking when I saw the match. The pattern on my neck was Route 16, an exact miniature representation of that cursed road, etched into my skin like a permanent reminder of where I'd been. I was marked, branded, and somewhere out there, in a station that existed and didn't exist on a road that went nowhere, something knew exactly where I was. The question was, what was it going to do about it? I made it back to Bismarck eventually, taking the long way through Montana, adding 4 days and 1,000 miles to my trip. My dispatcher asked why I'd taken such a roundabout route, and I told her I'd wanted to see some different country, needed a change of scenery. She accepted the explanation without comment, probably just glad I was back and available for new loads. But I wasn't the same driver who'd left 2 weeks ago. I was jumpier, more paranoid, constantly checking my mirrors for vehicles that might be following me or signs that might lead me astray. I started avoiding certain routes, certain times of day, certain weather conditions. If a storm was forecast, I'd cancel my run and wait it out, even if it meant losing money. If I saw construction signs that looked even slightly suspicious, I'd turn around and find another way. My colleagues noticed, started asking if I was okay, if something had happened on the road. I brushed them off, made excuses, but I could see the concern in their eyes. They thought I was losing it, thought the stress of the job was finally getting to me after 12 years. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was losing it. Or maybe I was the only one who understood what was really out there, waiting for drivers who took wrong turns on stormy nights. The mark on my neck never faded. It's still there now, 6 months later, as clear and defined as the day it appeared. I've learned to live with it, learned to accept that I'm carrying a permanent reminder of my time on Route 16. Some days I barely think about it. Other days it burns, a cold fire under my skin that makes me remember Ruth's voice on the phone, remember those frozen shapes in the ruins, remember that I'm marked and watched and never truly free. I still drive for a living, still haul freight up and down the highways, still spend my nights in truck stops and my days watching white lines scroll past. But I'm more careful now, more aware. I pay attention to the signs I see, the routes I follow, the places I stop. And I always trust my instincts when something feels wrong. Because I learned something that night on Route 16, something I'll never forget. Not all roads lead home. Some of them lead nowhere. And some of them lead to places you can never truly leave, even when you think you've escaped. I think about Ruth sometimes. Wonder if she's still there at that station that exists and doesn't exist. Still pouring coffee for travelers who've taken a wrong turn. Still trying to help people escape even though she can't escape herself. I like to think she is. I like to think she's not alone, that Tom is with her, that they're together in whatever strange twilight existence they've been consigned to. And sometimes, late at night when I'm driving through empty country, I'll see an orange construction sign marking a detour. My heart will skip a beat and my hands will tighten on the wheel, and I'll slow down, checking the GPS, checking the road ahead, making absolutely sure it's a real detour and not something else. So far, they've all been real. Just normal construction, normal traffic management, normal bureaucratic necessity. But I know that one day I might see another phantom detour, another set of signs that lead to a road that shouldn't exist. The old driver warned me it could happen, said the place marks you, and once you're marked, it can call you back. And when that happens, I'll have a choice to make. Do I follow the signs, knowing where they might lead? Do I risk another encounter with that space between spaces, that hungry place that feeds on lonely travelers? Or do I ignore the detour, stay on the main highway, pretend I never saw anything unusual? I'd like to think I'd be smart, that I'd keep driving and not look back. But I touch the mark on my neck sometimes, trace the lines of that miniature road map etched into my skin, and I wonder if maybe I'm already caught in a different kind of loop. Wonder if every day I spend avoiding Route 16 is actually bringing me closer to it. Wonder if the escape I thought I'd achieved was just the beginning of a longer, slower journey toward the same destination. Maybe that's what Ruth meant when she said lonely places get hungry. Maybe they don't just consume you all at once. Maybe they take their time, savoring the slow dissolution of certainty and safety, feeding on the paranoia and fear that grows in the spaces between encounters. Or maybe I'm just tired. Too many nights on the road, too many hours alone with my thoughts, too many miles between me and anything that feels like home. Maybe none of what I experienced was anything more than exhaustion and bad weather and a mind that filled in gaps with impossible explanations. I don't know which version I believe anymore. Some days the mark on my neck feels like proof of something extraordinary. Other days it's just a skin condition, a coincidental pattern that looks like a road if you're predisposed to see connections where none exist. But I do know this: I haven't stopped watching for those orange signs, haven't stopped checking my GPS against the roads I see, haven't stopped listening to the CB for voices that sound just slightly wrong, for conversations that loop back on themselves, for warnings that come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Because if it was real, if Ruth and Tom and Route 16 and all those frozen shapes in Mercy were real, then it could happen again. The mark on my neck says it could happen again. And next time I might not be lucky enough to receive warning messages, might not find a tunnel that leads to escape, might not have someone like Ruth willing to sacrifice herself to buy me time. So I drive carefully. I pay attention. I trust nothing. And I never, ever stop at gas stations that aren't on the map. Even when I'm almost out of fuel. Even when I'm desperate. Even when I see lights in the distance that look warm and welcoming and safe. Because I know better now. I know what's really out there, waiting in the empty spaces between the roads we travel. And I know that some invitations are better left declined. Some doors are better left unopened. Some roads are better left untraveled. The highway stretches out ahead of me, white lines scrolling past in the darkness, and I follow them toward whatever comes next. Toward Bismarck or Denver or Cheyenne, or any of 100 other destinations that need freight delivered and don't ask questions about where I've been or what I've seen. And if sometimes I see shapes in my mirror that shouldn't be there, if sometimes I hear voices on the CB that sound like Ruth Calder warning me about weather or wishing me safe travels, if sometimes I wake up in truck stop parking lots with frost on my windows in the middle of summer and a burning cold in the mark on my neck that tells me something is watching, something is waiting, something is slowly, patiently pulling me back toward Route 16. Well, I just keep driving. What else can I do? The road is all I have left. And the road always, always goes on. Even when it leads in circles. Even when it takes you places that don't exist on any map. Even when you realize, too late, that escape was an illusion and the real journey is just beginning. I touch the mark on my neck, feel the cold fire burning there, and I wonder how much longer I have before it calls me back. Before I see those orange signs again, and this time, I follow them. Not because I want to, but because some part of me, the part that carries Route 16 etched into my very skin, has no choice. The place marked me, and marked things always find their way home, eventually.